Hello and welcome, guys. Not sure if this voice is temporary or we stick with it. Unfortunately, the good old voice is down. Not sure if it's under maintenance or shut down. We could wait until the voice comes back, but I'm too hooked to wait. I'm making MP3s for myself at this point in different voice. Yes, this voice. So, comment down below, continue ASAP in this voice, or let's wait and get back to our good old Jack. Well now, let's get to the story. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. This is Affinity, Chaos. Chapter 771. I really want this. Klaus sighed as he saw Gray's domain. The trio who were caught in the domain were unable to break out of it. Gray's attacks increased by almost threefold. The trio were unable to defend for long before they were all knocked out cold. In the space of not more than 30 seconds, Gray had defeated 3 9th stage Overlord plane elementalists with ease. Klaus was standing on the other side of the platform, staring at his fingernails as if he wasn't even involved in the battle. This was by far the shortest last battle since the start of the competition. It was the shortest last battle in the history of the competition. The crowd were sure no one would be able to replicate this in a short time. Especially when being 2 stages below your opponents. From this, the crowd all knew that even if Klaus was eliminated and Gray fought against 4 people, he would still win easily. Is he still human? Someone from the crowd asked. Basically, yes. But I don't want to accept that he's like us. Maybe he's truly favored by the gods. Another person answered. Why is the world unfair? Someone asked. There were different reactions in the crowd, but the main thing was that they were all stunned and amazed by Gray's domain. Klaus looked at the trio who were knocked out and walked over with a shake of his head. How do we rank them now? He spoke with a thoughtful expression. That's not something we should concern ourselves with. Gray said. Oh, I know. Klaus smacked his lips lightly and he used water to gently pick up the young man and dropped him outside the platform. Now, he's 5th. Up next is you. He pointed at one of the young ladies and did the same act. He was very gentle when dropping each of them. They were already beaten by Gray, there was no use in causing them more harm. After sending them out, he turned to Gray. Now, your turn. He used his water to pick up Gray and was about to send him off the platform. Gray looked at Klaus as if he was staring at a moron. Klaus! He called out to him gently. Klaus acted as if he wasn't hearing his words since Gray was already close to the edge of the platform. Gray shook his head and teleported out of the water that held him. Wait, oh, it's you. I totally forgot about that. Klaus scratched his head awkwardly. AE. Gray looked at Klaus feigning ignorance and felt like beating him up. Just as Gray wanted to attack. Hold up. Klaus placed both hands in front of him, signifying for Gray to wait. I'm not done cleaning the platform yet, sheesh, always in a hurry. Klaus said as he walked towards the edge of the platform and jumped off. Who was he kidding? Why would he try to fight against Gray? Gray already promised to beat him up, things would be especially worse for him given the stunt he tried to pull some moments ago. I'm just letting you win since I don't want to hoard all the spotlight. I'm such a nice person. You should make sure to pay your respects later, all right? Klaus continued speaking as he walked back to their seats. He didn't even feel strange about the way he was eliminated. In the entire competition, Klaus was the only person who walked off the platform on his own. He didn't even try to fight against Gray. But the truth was, no one felt he made a wrong decision. Why would he fight against such a beast in the first place? Fighting against Gray was the same as asking for a beating. Everyone has already seen how Klaus speaks, so they were certain Gray would beat him up, especially after he tried to send Gray out of the platform after he removed the trio. Gray looked at Klaus' back view with a weird expression before he shook his head with a smile. He never thought Klaus would actually jump off the platform. I should have used the space element to keep him inside. That cunning bastard. He complained internally. This was one of the few opportunities he would get to beat up Klaus, but Klaus being Klaus was a step ahead of him, so he escaped easily. Why didn't you try to fight for your dignity? Reynolds asked when Klaus returned. Do I look like someone who cares about that? Klaus replied nonchalantly. Alice almost facepalmed, but she knew Klaus was correct. For someone as shameless as Klaus, he had zero care about his dignity. He wouldn't even mind tricking the entire world. Gray was declared the winner of the competition, but when he was asked which faction he wanted to join, his reply was none. His reply sent the crowd hysterical. They never thought he would actually refuse to join any of the factions. But they soon calmed down. Thinking about Gray's talent, he must have been from one of the very best faction or family in the entire Aurora continent, so there was no need in bothering about him joining a faction or not. However, what happened next sent the crowd hysterical once again. Bright lights shot out from the special sitting area where the elders from each faction were seated, and it was accompanied by a voice that said it was a gift from each faction present there. Gray had a strange expression as he looked at the gifts he was getting. He never thought the elders would give him gifts even after he refused to join any of them. He originally thought he would have been in trouble after rejecting them. Kyle, who was seated, had a dumbfounded expression. This was one of the strangest things he had seen. Gray's talent was immense, and these people didn't want to offend him. He could feel that they were scared of his background. Even he had a fear of Gray's mysterious background. Chapter 772. Gray walked back to his seat, and Klaus moved close to him with a smile. You know I was the one who let you win, he said. Who? Gray raised a brow curiously. What did they give to you? Klaus asked curiously. Gray paused and sent his spiritual senses into his storage ring, before replying, elemental techniques. All? Klaus asked. Yeah, all are elemental techniques. Gray nodded. How generous, Alice said. She never thought these people would give Gray so many gifts. Truly generous indeed, Kyle commented. So, what now? Reynolds asked. We're still here, let's have some fun. It's not like we're following them back to the faction, Klaus said. Actually, you are. Since you friends will be splitting up, you have 2 days to catch up. A beautiful lady who looked to be in her late 20s walked up to them. The group turned their attention to the lady. She was someone from the Moonlight faction. By her side, 2 men in their early 30s walked beside her. They were from the Ryden and Asterope faction. They also came to inform Alice and Reynolds that they would be leaving in 2 days. So quick? Klaus asked with a sigh. Normally, we would have left tomorrow, but in consideration of you 4, we decided to wait another day, the lady said. She didn't hide the fact that they only agreed to extend their stay because of Gray and his friends. It was quite shocking when Kyle heard of it. These factions were part of the top factions in this region, even in the Western continent, they were respected. Doing this showed how highly they regarded their new protégés. Gray's influence could not be neglected as well. Being a terrifying genius has its perks. Kyle sighed to himself. The other factions would be leaving the next day, only 3 factions would be staying longer. Thank you for giving us this chance, we'll make good use of it. Gray thanked the lady and the 2 men. They nodded their heads before inviting the geniuses from their factions. A few of them wanted to test out their strength against Gray. Gray, however, rejected the challenge. The geniuses felt a little disappointed, but they didn't take it to heart. They knew Gray wasn't proud from the small contact they've had with him. The group left the arena and headed for the inn they were staying in. Klaus suggested that they went out to celebrate their success in the competition. Gray wanted to stay in his room, but after Klaus, Reynolds, and Alice joined hands in convincing him, he finally agreed begrudgingly. Klaus plotted that they beat him up. They were almost successful, but having the space element meant Gray could easily escape from their encirclement. I miss the days when we could beat him. The group went out and started reminiscing about the first time they met. Kyle sat by and listened to their stories. Gray's story was particularly captivating. In the space of 5 years, he went from a normal person to a genius respected by even the top factions in the Western continent. Overhearing how they grew, Kyle wished he was with them at that time. Watching Gray grow in strength was something that was amazing. He was sure that if he was with Gray, he would have grown stronger than his current strength. Gray's growth was motivational, helping those close to him grow stronger. They stayed out almost all through the night. On their way back, they encountered some familiar faces. It was the trio who fought against Gray and Klaus in the final battle. They still found their defeat shocking, but they knew there was nothing they could do about it. "Hello." The young man amongst the trio walked up to them and looked at Klaus in particular. He heard Klaus was the one who eliminated them from the arena. All he wanted to know was why Klaus eliminated him first. He was stronger than the ladies, so he should have gotten the third position, but Klaus didn't give him that chance. "Hey, you look very familiar," Klaus said with a thoughtful expression. The young man was about to lose it when Klaus smiled. "I'm just messing with you." "How are you?" Klaus said with a soft laugh. The young man who came with the intent of arguing with Klaus was a little taken aback. Klaus was very carefree and didn't act as if they were strangers. "I'm okay, I guess," the young man replied after a short silence. "Good to know. We're heading back home now. Is anything wrong?" Klaus asked with a casual smile. "No, nothing. I only wanted to congratulate you too." The young man shook his head. He decided to let the matter go since asking wouldn't do him any good. "Oh, thank you. Congratulations on joining a good faction." Klaus shook the young man's hand before the group continued their journey. The young man looked at Klaus, and seeing the contrast between the current Klaus and the evil Klaus they fought against, he shook his head. "How come he's so friendly?" one of the young ladies asked. "Honestly, I don't know," the young man replied with a wry smile. They expected Klaus to talk in the same manner he did back in the competition. That way they would have a conflict with them, then in the process, one of their Sage Plane elementalists who was hiding in the cover of the darkness would come out and attack Gray and his friends. But Klaus was able to speak to them in such a manner that they couldn't do anything. "I guess it's best if we let this matter go. I don't think clashing with them will be good for us," the last young lady said. The young man and the young lady looked at her before nodding their heads. When they walked back to where their Sage Plane elementalists were hiding, they were stunned to see all of them lying on the ground out cold. "What happened?" The young man panicked. "You're lucky you didn't continue with your plan. Next time, I won't be so lenient." A cold voice came from the shadows, sending chills down the spines of the trio. Chapter 773. "Did you sense them?" Gray asked Void telepathically. "Yes. Looks like they were out to cause trouble for you guys, but Klaus managed to evade it," Void replied. Gray's eyes were cold, but he didn't say anything to the others. When they were stopped by the trio, he sent some Sage Plane elementalists. He originally planned to head over to where they were, but he hastily stopped when he noticed they weren't in the early stages of the Sage Plane. The trio must have been wary of his domain, so they brought people who were powerful. However, when they were leaving, Gray sensed a familiar yet strange aura appear for a brief moment. After the aura appeared, he noticed he couldn't sense the sage plane elementalists anymore. How come the aura is so familiar? He wondered to himself. With the increase in his strength, his sensory ability naturally improved as well. This was not the first time he was sensing this particular aura. Back at the Azure continent, when they were captured, and Klaus' father was fighting against the others, he also sensed this aura for a brief moment. Due to the situation, he didn't take note of it. But now, he was sensing this same aura again. There was no way two people would have the same aura. Gray didn't show any odd signs after sensing the aura. He continued acting as if nothing was wrong. Void, can you try to track the person? He asked Void. No, whoever you're talking about is either not here, or is too powerful that he can easily hide from my senses. Void replied. Other than Gray and Void, none of the others sensed the people who were hiding in wait for them. Had Klaus not avoided having any conflict with the trio, things might have been a little different. They got back to the inn and each went to their rooms. Gray decided since he had nothing to do, he should go through the techniques given to him by the factions. One of the skills he acquired was the technique to manipulate space. Other than his skill switch, he didn't really have any great space elemental skills. This will be useful in the future, he said in glee. This was the main reason he wanted to join a faction. Compared to the Azure continent, the Aurora continent had a better variety of elemental techniques. The techniques in the Azure continent could be said to be the basics, while these ones were the advanced ones. He showed the skill to Void, and in a matter of seconds, Void was able to comprehend it. It's a shame the person who did that move was evil. Void still regretted the fact that he couldn't learn the Great Void technique. What he found more annoying was that the skill even had his name on it. And he couldn't learn it. How frustrating! Gray laughed when he heard this. He knew Void was talking about the skill he got from the trial land. Don't worry, you'll find a way to learn something different. Gray comforted him. Hey, why don't you teach me that distortion thing you do? It's a powerful attack. No. I'll just take it that since I can't learn that skill, you won't learn my special skill as well. Void refused. Gray continued begging, and after bargaining with 7 shiny things, and promising to cook his favorite meals for a week, he finally agreed to teach him only part of it. According to Void, Gray shouldn't be in a hurry to learn this skill since it was dangerous. When Gray attempted it, he realized Void was right. The skill required a high control of space, and with Gray's current elemental grade, he wouldn't be able to do so. He might risk trapping himself in a dangerous situation. The Moonlight faction gave him a powerful ice skill. It involved creating an ice cube in the air, and it will continuously attack a particular target. It involves using his spiritual energy to mark the target, and within a 500 meters radius, the ice cube will continuously dish out attacks. Gray went through a lot of techniques, and he couldn't help but feel gratitude towards the elders who gave him the gifts. This was one of the reasons he wanted to get into a faction. The second reason was those secret realms. According to what he knew, all top factions have realms they send their geniuses into the train. These domains are rich with treasures, so he would see things that would make him grow stronger and faster. He still hasn't forgotten about his 2 years deal. Months have already passed, so he had less than 2 years. The quicker he grew, the better for him. The last time he saw the young man, he was already at the peak of the Overlord plane. Gray was certain the young man had broken through to the Sage plane a long time ago, so even with his insane speed of leveling up, he still wouldn't be a match for the young man if they encountered each other right now. By the time he finished going through the skills and picking out which ones he would focus on, it was already daybreak. Klaus and the others came once again to drag him out with them. They would be separating soon, so it was best to spend every minute together. They walked around the entire town, going to every place they could possibly go. They even attended an auction later that night. Joyner was the one who invited them to the auction. The group only went there for the fun of it. After the auction ended, Joyner invited them for a small party at his place. The mayor even appeared this time, speaking with the group. Klaus continued socializing with everyone. The person who hated him the most was the Earth Elementalist he eliminated from the three-way battle. When they crossed paths, the Earth Elementalist snorted coldly. Klaus smiled awkwardly before walking away. Chapter 774. 3 days went by in the blink of an eye. It was finally time for the group to part ways once again. Just like before, each would be going their separate ways. However, this time, things were different. They weren't being chased, well, except for Klaus, who had amassed a huge number of enemies during the competition, and Gray, who was being chased by necromancers. "So, we're separating once again," Alice said with a sad expression. "Yeah." The boys nodded, all sad that they were leaving their friends. "At least we're not being hunted this time," Klaus joked to break the silence. "Technically, I'm still hunted." Gray shook his head with a wry laugh. He never thought his days in the Aurora continent would be this perilous. Other than his strength, he basically had nothing to rely on. "Oh, I forgot about that." "Well, I guess some things never change." Klaus smiled. The others laughed at his subtle jeer. Even Gray laughed to it as well. The group said their goodbyes before heading towards the people of the factions they joined. Gray and Kyle looked on as the groups left with their elders. Gray gave them some of the treasures he had with him. "What now?" "Where are you going?" Kyle asked. They were the only ones left with the departure of the others. "I have no idea. Where are you going?" Gray replied with a shrug. The truth was that he didn't know his next destination. His plan was to travel across the regions and see if he would find what he was looking for. "I'll be going back to my family. I only came out to stretch my legs," Kyle replied after a moment of silence. "All right, here's a communication device I made. You can use it to interact with the others." Gray passed one of the plaques he made to Kyle. "Oh, how convenient." Kyle studied the plaque Gray gave to him. Gray turned in the other direction, preparing to leave. "Why don't we travel together since we're both going the same way?" Kyle asked. "Oh, sure." Gray nodded before waiting for him. They left this city after spending days there. Gray's current destination was the next region on the map, while Kyle would be stopping at the next region as well. "How do you plan to cope with the mark on you?" Kyle asked the important question he had in mind. "I'm still thinking about it, but I guess all I can do for now is to be cautious," Gray replied. He was still working on the array he wanted to use in hiding the mark on his body. But he still haven't been able to get any good result. Kyle looked at Gray's carefree attitude. He couldn't help but wonder if he wasn't afraid of the threat of the necromancers. 1 week later. Gray and Kyle had been traveling through multiple cities, and they were finally at the last city before entering the next region. Gillar City. Gray and Kyle were sitting in an inn, listening to what has been happening in the region to see if they might get news about any treasure, just like the time they got news of the treasure Void wanted back at the mansion. "We're being followed," Kyle said to Gray. "You've noticed too?" Gray asked. "Yes, for some time now. I only waited to confirm my senses." Kyle nodded. "My bet's on necromancers. They are the only ones who would follow us." Kyle added. "We had a squabble with some people some days back, so it might also them." Gray said his thoughts. "Whoever it is, they're really bad at hiding their tracks." He added. "Confront or pretend?" Kyle asked for Gray's choice. He was stuck in confronting the person or continue pretending to see what these people were up to. "Let's pretend for a while. Since the person isn't concealing their aura, it means there's a motive behind it." Gray replied after giving it some thoughts. Okay. The duo continued walking in the city, and they still sensed the person following them. Gray brought the idea of them going to a secret alley to confront whoever it was. Kyle agreed to it, and they headed for the nearest alley. When they got there, the person going after them hid not too far from them, trying to see what they were up to. Void. Gray called out in his mind. Void vanished from his shoulder. A few seconds later, he returned with the figure of a chubby lady. "Who are you?" Gray asked in a straightforward manner. They knew you would do this." The lady laughed in an odd manner before she started inflating in size. "Oh no." Gray's expression changed before he grabbed Kyle's hand and activated a talisman he took from his teacher. The light element wrapped him and sent them flying in the other direction. The chubby lady's figure burst apart and a ray of light shot at them. While escaping, Gray instantly entered the fusion state and tried to use the Great Void technique. He tore through space and dove in with Kyle in tow. The ray of light chased after him. It entered space along with Gray, chasing after him as he tried to escape from the ray of light. This wasn't the first time he was sensing this ray of light. It is usually placed in a puppet, belonging to the necromancers. When he was experimenting with one of the corpses, he saw this thing inside. It was extremely dangerous, and he could tell that if that thing hits him, he would be in danger. That lady was surprisingly a puppet belonging to a necromancer. This was, however, one of the most lifelike puppets he had seen, other than the ones made by those creatures. "Damn it!" Gray complained as he saw the ray of light entering the spatial tunnel with him. He never thought something like this would happen. A spatial tunnel opened in another location and Gray shot out of it. Behind him was a ray of light. Chapter 775. Gray's figure was covered with a bright light as he flew as fast as he could. Even with help of his teacher's talisman, he still wasn't able to escape from the ray of light. "What do we do now?" Void asked telepathically. "What can we do?" Gray asked with a wry smile. He knew his chances of escaping from this thing with his current strength were 0. Even a Sage Plane Elementalist would not be able to escape from it, much less him who is still in the Overlord plane. He wasn't even at the peak yet. Just when the ray of light was about to hit him, he sensed a familiar aura. "It's that person again," he thought internally. He turned around, only to see a man he found familiar standing in front of him. The ray of light, which was about to hit him, was blocked by the man's outstretched arm. "Troublesome," the man muttered as he squeezed the light. The ray of light started to fade, before completely fading off. The man turned to look at Gray with a smile. "How are you doing?" the man asked with a shake of his head. "It's you," Gray exclaimed. He had seen this man a couple of times in the Azure continent. At that time, the man was a regular person, but he knew the person standing before him was above the Sage plane. He might even be above an elemental venerable. "Yes, how have you been?" The man nodded while placing both hands behind him. "Fine," Gray replied with a confused expression. "I believe you have a lot of questions, correct?" the man asked. Gray nodded. He still had Kyle on his hand since they were still mid-air. "Well, you'll have your answers soon enough, but for now, take care," the man said and disappeared out of view. "Wait." Gray tried to stop him, but he was a little too slow. The man was far stronger than him, so there was no way he could stop him from leaving. Gray was frustrated because he wanted to know why the man was following him, but the man didn't give him the chance to. "Void, do you know where he is?" he asked Void. "No, he's too powerful," Void replied after a few seconds of silence. He tried to block the space when the man tried to leave, but he was unable to. Even with the help of his domain, he still wasn't able to stop him. Kyle looked at the entire encounter with an odd expression. He hadn't seen the man before, but he knew he was a very powerful figure. But from what he could tell, he knew the man was protecting Gray. I knew his identity was not simple. He thought internally. He had always thought that Gray was from a big family or faction. However, the fact that Gray didn't know that the man was protecting him was what he found surprising. For such a talent, any big family or faction would protect him at all costs. Gray should be aware that he was being protected from the shadows, but his behavior showed that he doesn't. Gray flew down and dropped Kyle with a confused expression. Why is he protecting me? He fell deep in thoughts. Anytime he sensed this aura, it was when he was in danger. The aura would arrive in time to protect him secretly. This time, due to the complex situation, the man was forced to come out from the shadows once again. Teacher's in the Sage Plane, so there is no way he would be able to send someone above the Sage Plane to watch over me. Gray's head went into overdrive as he thought of who could possibly send someone to protect him. With his teacher out of the picture, there were only 3 people left on his list. The first was his parents, the next was Ella's family, and the last was Sylvia. It shouldn't be either Ella's family or Miss Sylvia since I've seen him before even heading to the Aurora continent. Sylvia and Ella's family couldn't possibly be able to send someone to watch over him even before knowing him, so they were out of the list as well. He knew nothing of his background, and given how mysterious his parents were, he had his suspicions about them being very powerful. The fact that they could appear from nowhere and disappear at will showed that. But if they were powerful, then why did they keep it hidden from him? Not just that, but why would they leave him in such a place? Just like the man said, he had a lot of questions, however, there was no one to answer them. The only person who could answer them was the man or his parents, but none of them were present at the moment. Are you okay? Kyle asked. He noticed Gray hasn't been saying anything since he landed. He seemed to be deep in thoughts. So he felt compelled to ask if he was all right. Oh, yes. I'm good. Gray replied. Where are we now? I didn't even get the chance to head in the direction we wanted to. He looked around before asking Kyle. We should be a few thousand kilometers away from the borders. Kyle replied after taking a good look around. Okay. I guess we should find a way to get back on track then. Gray said with a serious expression. All right. Kyle nodded before leading the way. Gray was silent as they walked through the woods. Someone was protecting him, and he didn't know who or why. He had no issues with the fact that he was being protected. If not for this person, he might have died from the last sneak attack. But he hated not being in control of things. This man might be a potential threat who only wanted to ensure he was the one who killed him. Void, can we use that thing now? Gray asked. No, it's too dangerous. Void rejected the idea of using the treasure they got from the mansion. Chapter 776. Then what do we do? Gray asked Void, a little frustrated. There's nothing we can do. Void replied with a bland expression. Gray felt a little frustrated, but there was nothing he could do about it. He kept quiet and increased his cautiousness as they traveled. With their last experience, Kyle knew they would always have to be cautious. He also noticed the change in Gray's behavior since the encounter. Especially when the man appeared. Time went by and after 3 days, they had entered the next region. We'll be going our separate ways soon, Kyle said to Gray as they walked into a town. Okay. Gray nodded. Kyle had been speaking more with Klaus and the others with the communication device, more than he had been doing with Gray, who was present. Gray was almost always training whenever they were not moving, so there was almost no chance to speak with him. Klaus and the others had been doing well in their factions. Klaus was the one who seemed the happiest. According to him, he was training in the most conducive place for him. Surrounded by beauties made his training easier. Kyle still hasn't been able to believe that Klaus was actually able to join the Moonlight faction. It was still a surprising event. One of the things he enjoyed about traveling with Gray was his cooking. He couldn't help but admit that Gray was one of the best cooks he had met in his life. Gray had been cooking frequently because of his teacher, so Kyle and Void got to eat a lot of delicacies. The duo stayed together for a few more days before finally going their separate ways. Gray was heading towards the northern part of the region, while Kyle was going towards the eastern part of the region. "What's the plan now?" Void asked as they watched Kyle's disappearing figure. "I guess I should look for a faction to join," Gray replied. "All right. We should get going then," Void said. He still hasn't been able to achieve a breakthrough. If Gray were to join a faction, given how they would treat him, he would be able to use the treasure there without any problems. Gray and Void started their journey once again. They were used to traveling together, so there were no issues with them. Gray focused entirely on cultivating. He had been trying to increase the elemental grade of his earth element, while also practicing the new elemental skills he acquired. The earth elemental skills with him were a bit helpful, but he still hadn't been able to increase his elemental grade yet. Void had been a little bored since nothing interesting was happening. Gray had been extremely cautious with how he handled things. There was a time he even avoided clashing with people in the origin plane, just because of the fear of being ambushed by others who were more powerful. His research in arrays had been stagnant for some time now. He even asked his teacher for help with it. But his teacher hadn't been able to provide anything tangible as well. When he told his teacher about the Markan necromancers, he noticed his teacher reacted in a strange manner. He tried to ask his teacher what was wrong, but his teacher didn't tell him anything. Some days later, Gray walked into a small town. He noticed there was a strange aura circulating around the place. Void. On it. Void disappeared from his shoulder, and after a few minutes, he returned. "There's no one here," Void said. "Who?" Gray looked around. He could tell there was human activity in this town. Thinking about it, he felt it was best to leave the town and continue his search for a faction. Before he could leave, he sent some people rushing over. "You, stop there!" A voice came from above. Gray looked in the sky and saw a group of youths being carried by a large bird. After studying them, he continued walking. They were all in the Overlord plane, so he had no reason to obey them. "Are you deaf?" I said stop there. The voice ordered overbearingly before the bird flew over to where Gray was headed, blocking his path. On the bird were 8 youths, 3 young ladies, and 5 young men. The person who spoke to Gray was the young man in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane. From how he was standing in front of the others, Gray guessed he was the leader of the group. "What do you want?" Gray asked with a blank expression. "What happened here?" The young man asked in a commanding tone. "Why are you asking me?" Gray asked in annoyance. He hated people like this who felt they were on top of the world. The young man didn't even show any courtesy. The young man's expression changed slightly when he saw Gray's reaction. He was about to continue speaking when one of the young ladies stepped forward. "Sorry for the way he spoke to you. We were sent here to investigate the strange events that had been happening in the area. This is the most recent event, so we rushed here. Seeing you here, we felt maybe you would know what happened." The young lady apologized for the young man's behavior before telling Gray their reason for stopping him. "I only came here a few minutes ago. But I can tell you that there's no one here, that's all I know," Gray replied. "All right, thank you for your help," the young lady said before turning to the others. "We should continue our investigation. Whoever is doing this shouldn't have gone far," she said to the others. The young man who Gray thought was the leader of the group snorted coldly as he looked at Gray before he followed the others into the bird as they flew away. Strange occurrences. What do you think of it? Gray asked Void. This was the first time they were seeing this. They had been traveling in this area for some days now, and they hadn't seen a situation like this before. Maybe it started recently. There might be a treasure involved. Do you want to investigate it as well? Void asked with sparkling eyes. No, I have no interest in wasting my time on these things. Gray went in the other direction the bird flew. Chapter 777. Gray wanted to avoid any conflict as much as he could. He was already entangled with the necromancers, and for some reason, he could tell he was already well known among them. The fact that the corpse puppet was able to say what it said indicated that. The sooner he got into a suitable faction, the better for him. Unfortunately, his search has not yielded anything of value yet. He had been going from one city to another since entering this region, but no news of any faction recruiting people. He naturally knew he wouldn't be as lucky as the previous faction where there was a competition going on at the time they got there. Some days later. Who? Again? Gray looked at the deserted village in front of him with an odd look. This was the fourth village he was seeing since the last town, and all of them were empty. Just like in that town, there was a strange aura circulating around. However, this time, he felt a sense of unease about the situation. Void, can you sense anything? He asked while standing on the same spot, looking around. Nothing, for now. But I feel whoever did this is still here. Void replied while looking around vigilantly. Me too. Gray nodded. The aura here was thicker than when he passed those villages. It was as if the act was just being carried out a few minutes before he arrived. Search the place, we'll think of what next to do after that. He said to Void before disappearing. Void nodded and disappeared as well. Somewhere underground, a group of people were looking at the light on the map with playful grins. I think it's high time we take this one too, don't you think? A man asked with a chuckle. He might be one of them as well. Another man pointed at a group of youths tied on the ground, helpless and injured. It was none other than the group Gray saw in the first town he saw this situation. He's a space elementalist, so we have to be very careful when dealing with him. We can't afford to let our tracks be leaked by a kid. A more advanced man said. The strange thing about these people was that, although all of them looked like humans, there was a slight difference in their eyes. Unlike humans who mostly had black, brown, blue, and golden eyes, with a few having amber eyes, these people mostly had purple, red, and some other colors. There was also a horn on their heads. Each person's horn was the same color as their eyes, so it was safe to say they were not humans. Gray, who was above ground, knew nothing of the people watching him from below. All he wanted to do was to see if he could at least figure out what was happening. Even though there wasn't much he could do, since he had already passed through multiple villages, he felt compelled to at least know the cause of all this. While he was searching for any clues in the village, he felt his hair standing on edge. Without even thinking, he blinked out of his present location, appearing in another place. Bang! An explosion rang out from where he was previously standing as a 10 meters wide stone appeared from nowhere. Void. Almost there. Gray first thought whenever in a battle like this was to call out to Void first. After that, his next objective was to find out who attacked him. His expression changed when he sensed someone staring at him. Looking in that direction, he saw a man who looked to be in his late 30s staring at him aggressively. What drew his attention was the horn on the man's head. Someone from another race? He thought to himself. He had heard of these people before. Most realms had people like these in them. Some are very troublesome and tend to cause a lot of harm to humans, while others prefer isolation. This race is clearly part of the former. What are you doing with the people in these villages? Gray asked in a straightforward manner. He was no saint, but he still wanted to know. As a human, he couldn't just let the matter go since he had already seen it. Humans might be greedy and selfish, but once they have a common enemy from a different race or world entirely, they tend to be able to unite against them. Of course, there are a few people who would cause conflicts in a situation like that, but people mostly prefer being the cause of other people's problems, rather than letting a foreign race do that for them. It's none of your business. Now, surrender quietly, and we might let you live, the man said. When he finished his statement, 3 more men came from the ground. All are capable of using the earth element. I wonder where they came from. Gray thought as he looked at the 4 people in front of him. He wasn't scared of them. What bothered him was where the people captured were taken to. I guess I'll have to make you tell me yourself, Gray said before launching an attack. He was still in the 7th stage of the Overlord plane, but he could sense that his earth elemental grade was on the verge of having a breakthrough. Adding that with his cultivation, he was sure he would be able to break through to the 8th stage of the Overlord plane. The 4 men exchanged glances before spreading out in different directions. After they got in formation, they said something in a strange language before a powerful force field appeared from nowhere. Gray felt stuck, unable to advance nor retreat. This was something he had been trying to comprehend for some time now, but he still hadn't been able to. He could feel the weight of the air increasing, and his bones shook from the force. I knew they wouldn't be easy to deal with, he thought to himself as he started to think of a way to escape his current predicament. Chapter 778. Gray's figure moved slowly. Even after trying to open up a space tunnel, he sensed that the second the space tunnel opened up, it collapsed immediately. If he had gone into it, he would have been in great danger. This shocked him greatly. The space element had been one of his most trusted methods of escaping, but these people had been able to counter him without giving him the chance to escape. This was one of the dangers of fighting against people he knew nothing about. Void, try not to enter this place. They have a way of locking down the space, and it's not pretty, he advised Void, who was rushing over. Got it. Void's reply echoed in his head. Gray started to use his elements to boost his physical strength before rushing in one direction. His plan was to attack one of the men. This would surely be able to put them off. The men realized this in time and retreated along with Gray's movements. Even though they found the fact that Gray could still move to be very baffling, they didn't let it stop their coordinated attack. Gray dodged the attacks they sent his way as he moved around. This force field was a great way to train his physical body. Unfortunately, he didn't have it. He soon managed to get close to one of the men, and he threw a punch in his direction. The man blocked the punch by crossing both arms in front of him. For the first time since Gray was fighting, someone he attacked with his physical strength didn't even flinch. Ooh? He was taken aback by it. He naturally expected the man to at least move back a little. My turn, the man said with a smile as he threw a punch in Gray's direction. Gray naturally wouldn't sit still and watch this man's blow connect with him. He evaded the blow, before dishing out one of his own. Before he knew it, he was entangled in a fist fight against the man. Bang! Boom! Bam! The speed of their punches were quick and accurate, making sure to deliver a powerful blow to the opponent. This was Gray's first time engaging in this since breaking through to the arcane plane. And to be honest, he found it extremely thrilling, to say the least. A fist fight was miles apart from a regular elemental battle. This gave him more room to show his physical strength, while also training it as well. The man was stunned by the fact that Gray was able to keep up with his speed. Fascinating, I didn't know there were people like this in this world, one of the other 3 men commented. The other men nodded, astounded by Gray's performance so far. Gray and the man continued fighting. Void was already in the area, but Gray told him to hide his presence since he still didn't know what they were dealing with. There might be more of these people, and it would be best if they knew that he was the only one here. This way, in times of danger, he would be able to escape without too much of a hassle. Void agreed with his plan and stayed hidden, watching the battle closely. Gray didn't let his opponent get the upper hand as he fought fiercely. Bang! Gray's figure was forced back by a punch from the man. After sliding on his feet for a few meters, he stopped and looked at the man. The man had barely broken a sweat, but Gray was already starting to pant, albeit very slowly. His eyes were sharp. While fighting with the man, he could sense a strange vibration coming from the man's body. If not for the help of his multiple elements, he knew he would have been defeated long ago. Your strength is commendable, but you're still not on my level, the man said. Oh, I was only getting warmed up, Gray replied in an indifferent tone. The man looked at Gray before saying, if so, I would like to see your true strength. Gray didn't say anything as he tried to keep his figure standing. The pressure from the force field started increasing the second he started to fight. He could feel his physical body was growing stronger by the moment, but he knew he couldn't keep up with this for long. The force field will eventually get to a stage where his elements wouldn't be able to help him. In respect to the man's words, he laughed on the inside. Who was he kidding? He had shown his full physical strength, but this man was obviously stronger than him. And from what he could tell, the man hasn't gone all out yet. The man took the initiative to attack this time, and the rest of the formation moved with him as he attacked. Gray struggled to defend against the continuous attacks of the man. He could barely keep up with the increased speed and strength of the man. As time went on, he slowly started to receive punches on his body. His figure was sent flying, but the force field ensured that he didn't go airborne. Gray's face crashed into the ground before bouncing off. Damn! That must have hurt, Void thought as he watched Gray's figure bouncing on the ground, before finally coming to a stop some few meters away. Gray stood up and looked at his body. He could already feel the pains from the blows that hit him, and bruises were all over his body. This guy is ruthless. He spat out a bit of blood before wiping his mouth. Void, disrupt the formation, Gray said. Now, he couldn't care about the others. As long as he could leave this formation, he would be able to deal with the people that would come. But for now, the most important thing was leaving this godforsaken formation. The formation made it hard for him to use his elements outside of his body. This meant that he could only fight with his physical body at this moment. He had tried using elemental attacks a few times, but he had failed to even produce a spark. The only thing he didn't try was his domain. He was sure it would work, but he wanted to keep it hidden for now. Chapter 779. Void appeared behind one of the men and attacked decisively. He didn't hold back, and the man was almost ripped apart by his attack. The formation broke apart instantly. And Gray got access to his elements once again. Without even waiting for anything, he blinked to where the man he was fighting against and attacked. The man was able to block Gray's attack, but he was sent flying in the process. Gray continued his attack on the man, not giving him any chance to recover. Void left the man who was already on the verge of death and attacked the next person. Since Gray and the people were already fighting, there was no use in letting them go. Gray soon defeated the man, before taking on the last one. In the space of a few minutes, the duo had completely incapacitated the four men. The ones attacked by Void were both on the verge of death. If they were left unattended, they would most definitely die. "You evil beings," one of the men Gray beat up said through gritted teeth. "You're calling us evil?" "Really?" Gray asked with an odd expression. These were the same people who had been taking people away from towns. Now they were calling him evil. "If you know what's good for you, you would let us go and leave this place now," the man threatened. "Actually, I'm quite interested in a few things. What's with the different color of horns?" Gray pointed at the horns of one of the injured ones. If they die, then you will have to live a life worse than death. The man continued threatening. Gray looked at the man coldly before nodding to Void. To the surprise of the man, he saw one of his comrades disappearing bit by bit. This was Void's special attack, spatial distortions. Since the man was already in this state, there was no way he could fight against it. He could only watch as his body disintegrated bit by bit. What was worse was that he couldn't even feel the pain of it. I don't like being threatened, Gray said after the man was completely disintegrated. The man still couldn't believe what he saw. Gray killed one of them with such ease and calmness. It was as if Gray didn't feel anything. How could a child like you be this evil? The man asked in horror. The world is not a friendly place. I understood this at a very young age. Gray replied casually before pointing at the horns once again. Our horns are sacred to us. We cannot tell you about it, the man said. Gray looked at Void and nodded at him once again. Void smiled and walked over to the last man on the verge of death. In the presence of the other two, he used his small paws to grab hold of the horns, and with a powerful tug, he dragged the horn out of the head of the man. Even at death's door, the man screamed from the excruciating pain he was going through as Void pulled out his horn. Gray and Void were probably one of the most brutal people, and this group were unfortunate to have met them. Gray was even more annoyed after being stuck in that formation. The man died after Void pulled out his horn. Void's eyes glittered as he stared at the horns. Good stuff. Oh, it's something valuable? Gray's interest was piqued when he heard Void's comment. Yeah, it can be used to make elemental weapons. You know there are grades for the weapons. With this, you can get the highest tier of elemental weapons. Void explained as he looked at the horns on the head of the other two. Seeing Gray and Void's gaze, the last two men shivered in fear. Where are you guys from? Gray asked curiously. Why are you asking? One of the men asked in fear. They were afraid Gray would greedily attack their home and kill everyone there for their horns. I'm not a greedy person, I'm just curious, nothing more. Gray replied casually. Well, our world is far from here. The man answered after a few seconds of silence. He was afraid Gray would kill him if he didn't answer, and from how the other man was shaking, he knew he would say everything if he died, so what was the use of keeping silent and falling in the hands of these beasts? Interesting. Why are you abducting people? Gray nodded after hearing his words. He didn't know if it was the truth or a lie, but he didn't ask any further. This? The man answering the questions froze. He was afraid of Gray's reaction once he told him the reason for their actions. As I said, I'm more curious than interested in whatever you're doing. Gray said. He looked at the men before adding, I can still kill you and ask that guy. I believe he'll respond to my questions quicker. Unlike humans, we cannot create elemental orbs since most of our essence lies in our horns, so we extract the elemental orbs from humans to aid the growth of our young geniuses. The man explained with much difficulty, but I can assure you that this is the only time we've done it. Oh wow! Gray exclaimed unconsciously. He never thought humans would be used in the same manner they use the Sealies. If not for questioning these guys, he wouldn't have known about it. His only concern was how much of the truth they were hiding in their lies. From the man's expression, he was 100% certain that not everything he was saying was the truth, but he couldn't be bothered with him. He had other things to worry about. Where are the people from this village then? Gray continued his questioning. They. The man's eyes darted in different directions. I see, you're only doing this to distract me to give the others the chance to escape, correct? Gray quickly caught up with his plan. Chapter 780. When the man heard Gray's question, he froze. He had been trying to ensure that he stayed as calm as possible, but Gray was already onto them. HMPH. So what? Even if you know, what can you do? He snorted coldly. The cat was already out of the bag, so there was no use in pretending any longer. He was not scared of death, since they had the guts to come out from their world into the Aurora continent. They were already prepared to risk it all. With the elemental orbs they were collecting, they needed at most 200 years, then they would be able to produce a few people that might be able to break through the barriers of their world. If one person can do this, then the shackles of their world would be broken and the others would have no problems with doing so as well. If the person, however, breaks through outside their world, then it changes nothing. This is one of the reasons why the people from other worlds were strictly monitored by the top factions. Humans didn't want to give them the chance they needed to grow to the stage where they would be a cause of worry for them. Most of the worlds had limitations of the Overlord plane, while there are a few that had limitations set on the Sage plane. Gray still found these things strange, since he still couldn't comprehend how an entire world would be unable to break through to the Sage plane or become elemental venerables. Could our world be a small world to a bigger world as well? This question has been lingering in his mind for some time now. If there were smaller realms, then there is also a chance that there is a bigger realm, one that is higher than theirs. It was only a matter of time before they would realize they were just in as much danger as the people from these realms they use for training. You're going to die regardless, but before you do, you will definitely tell me where they are located. Gray's eyes were cold. Gray's figure slowly moved closer to the man. The silence of the village was soon broken by the dreadful screams of the man as Gray and Void went to work. Gray alone was already very dangerous when it came to torturing people. Adding Void's somewhat psychotic nature to it, things went wild, extremely wild. The man screamed in pain, wishing for death that never came. Gray and Void took their time on him, making sure he felt every single pain. The man passed out so many times that they lost count in the space of a few minutes. After almost 5 minutes, and what could be said to be a successful operation, Gray turned to the other man who was already shivering before they started the torture. "Now, where are they?" he asked coldly. He never had the thought of getting the answers from the first man. His plan was simple. Set fear in the mind of this one who doesn't seem to be as mentally strong as the other one. The man looked at the two bodies on his side. One of them was still alive, while he could still hear the shrill screams of the other while his horns were being pulled out. "They are taken to our hideout some kilometers away from here. I can take you there if you want," the man replied while sweating buckets. Gray tapped him on the shoulder with a smile. "See, I'm not such a bad person if you cooperate, am I?" The man shook his head. "You're a good human." Gray nodded in agreement before getting the accurate position of the hideout and then knocking out the man. "Void, what do you think?" he asked. The others would definitely be long gone. I'm sure one person would be left behind to see how things turn out here. This means we currently have only a few minutes to react, given the information we just acquired. Void replied calmly. "I'm not talking about that. What I'm asking is if we should head there or not." Gray asked. He already knew the others had escaped from the second he killed the first man. What he wanted to know now was if they should get involved or not. It would be best if he went on his way as planned, but since he was already here, he knew there would be no harm in checking things out. Of course, there are more horns to be taken. Void nodded. He had zero interest in the people abducted. What he was concerned about was the horns and how valuable they were. "All right, let's get going then." Gray nodded before keeping the body of the two unconscious men and burning the last one. When he burnt it, he noticed a strange light left the man's body and shot in a certain direction. The light was faint, and its speed was unfathomable. He didn't notice it when Void killed the first man, but watching this one, he was stunned. Could this be a way to track where their world is located? He thought to himself. He felt maybe the essence of the men was returning back to their realm, and it was most likely possible since there were a lot of strange things going on in the world. After taking the two men, he headed in the direction of the hideout, moving as fast as he could. He had to get there before whoever was left to scout the area got there. It was a race between them, and he was certain he would win. The battle wasn't that bad, thanks to their formation. I've gotten some insights on the gravitational field. I just need a few more things and I'll be able to make one of my own. Gray thought to himself. The force field these people made was similar to the one he had been trying to comprehend, so it was really helpful staying in it for so long. As long as he focused on training now, he was certain that he would advance in his training soon enough. Chapter 781. 5 days later. Gray was standing outside a gorge, looking at the surrounding. He brought out the man he tortured, and seeing his reaction the moment he saw the place, he was certain they were in the right place. All he needed to do was to play a few psychological games, and he would be able to win this man over. If he could get someone reliable on the other side, it would be a huge win for him. On his way here, he had been training for a while now. He could almost sense the increase in his Earth elemental grade. He was also very close to comprehending the gravitational field that had escaped him for so long. His other focuses were the elemental skills he acquired as gifts from the top factions back at the competition. He had learned a few of them, but most of them were very difficult to practice without targets. The beasts he encountered couldn't really be counted as targets since they were easy to kill. Void had been training hard as well, trying to break through to the Sage Plane. He still hadn't been able to, even after being at the peak of the Overlord Plane for a while now. This showed Gray that it was no easy feat to break through to the Sage Plane from the Overlord Plane. Even for a magical beast as talented as Void, he still hadn't been able to do so. Thinking about it, he was a little scared. He spent too long at the peak of the Origin Plane. If the same happened once he gets to the peak of the Overlord Plane, then he wouldn't know what to do. The fear of not repeating the same thing, he had been training his physical body to move at almost the same speed as his cultivation stage. Of course it was slower, but he was making considerable progress. He was currently close to the 4th stage of the Overlord Plane from just his physical body alone, so he knew he still had a long way to go. However, one of the instigators of his quick advancement was his battle under the formation. If he could create his own gravitational field, then he would be able to boost his physical training speed by a lot. After keeping the man he tortured, Gray brought the other one. He asked all the important questions he needed. There were definitely some places he had to avoid so he wouldn't be noticed as he sneaked into the hideout. The man told him all he needed before he knocked him out and kept him back in his storage ring. He still found it odd that whenever the people were conscious, they could not be kept in the spatial ring, but the second they were unconscious, they could be kept inside. After making sure he was set, Gray ventured into the gorge. This was a place he knew nothing about, so he was very cautious. Since his last encounter with necromancers, he hadn't seen any other one, and he hoped things stayed that way. As they traveled through the gorge, Gray moved with caution. He couldn't afford to give himself away to these people. Some hours later, he soon got to one of the checkpoints the man told him about, and just like the man said, he saw 3 men hiding in 3 different locations. According to the man, these men were only there for precautions. The true thing that would detect people was a device. It was like an array, but it was different. Gray knew nothing about it, but the man told him how to go through it without having to fear he would be sensed by it. Following the instructions, while also preparing to escape in case he was tricked, he managed to go through it. Guess he didn't lie. Gray thought as he looked at his 3 new captives. He wasn't foolish enough to trust the man, so he captured these 3 as well. After being kept in the same place as Void for a few minutes, they naturally spilled the beans. These men were weaker than the ones he encountered, being in the Origin stage. Only one of them was at the peak of the Origin Plane. He continued going deeper, and with every checkpoint he got to, he acquired new captives. In the space of a few hours, he had swept most of the northern part of the gorge since he came in through that area. If I'm not mistaken, then that light came in this direction as well. Is there a chance that this is where the entrance to their world is? He thought to himself. It would be the best hideout for these people since they would be in the safety of their realm. No one above the Overlord plane could get in, which meant they could still fight against the people who came in. Gray continued his journey with a serious expression. As he got closer to the middle, he noticed a strange occurrence. Void. He whispered. I can sense them as well. Void replied. There were people in the gorge, and just like Gray, they were heading to the middle of the gorge. Not just that, but they had also sensed Gray as well. They headed straight for Gray's location, while Gray decided it was best to stay in the same location. If they were to clash against each other, then it would be to the benefit of the Horned Men. A few minutes later, a group of 6 youths appeared in front of Gray. The group was led by a young man who looked to be around Gray's age, but he was already at the peak of the Overlord plane. Every single member of the group of 6 were youths around Gray's age, but they were all at the peak of the Overlord plane. Gray could sense that compared to the Overlord plane elementalists he had encountered, these ones were vastly different. He could sense a slight pressure from them. This showed they were not people that he could deal with easily. If he doesn't use his fusion state, he might lose against each of them. Chapter 782. The group of youths stared at Gray, studying him for a while. When they realized he was in a lower stage, they were taken aback since he managed to get here with such a stage. How did you get here? The young man leading the group asked coolly. Gray looked at them for a few seconds before telling them about the strange occurrence and how he saw some of the Horned Men and followed them here. The group looked at him. They naturally didn't believe him, but they couldn't say he was lying either. They knew how difficult it was to fight against these Horned people. Getting information from them was even harder. But with their strength, they were able to do so in the end. Maybe he encountered those in lower stages. They concluded internally. You shouldn't advance any further. From here on out, things will start to get dangerous. The young man leading the group of 6 advised. Thanks for your concern, but I think I can manage. Gray replied with a calm expression. The young man looked at him for a few seconds, before nodding, all right, but try not to get in our way. Gray nodded before heading in the other direction. He sensed the pride of a genius in everyone in the group, but unlike most of the people he encountered, their pride was ingrained in them, not something forced. They didn't need to show off to others or undermine people just to feel at the top. They already knew they were at the top, so what was the use of trying to get people to know or see that? After Gray left, the group of 6 exchanged glances. Doesn't he look a little like that man? One of the ladies in the group asked. Oh, you thought the same as well? The young man leading the group asked. Yes. The young lady nodded. We should complete this mission and head back soon. It's only a small resemblance, we can't assume things. Another young man said. His eyes were colder compared to the others. We know, Gil, but we just couldn't help ourselves from speaking about it. The young lady who spoke the first time said. After they finished speaking, they continued their journey. Gray took another path because of the group, so his trip became a little longer than his usual expectations, but he could tell he was getting closer. The reason for this was that the Horned people he was seeing now were all around the early stages of the Overlord plane. Not just that, but he could sense a heaviness in the surrounding as well. It's just like the formation they made. He thought to himself. With the faintness of the force field, once it gets to a certain level, then he would find it difficult to use his elements. This is going to be very dangerous. He said to Void. Coat yourself with the darkness element, it can help for now. But I don't think it would help once you get to a region where the strength of the force field increases to the level of the one they made when you fought against them. Void replied. Gray nodded and did as Void advised. He realized the pressure from the force field reduced significantly. He gave Void a thumbs up before removing it. This was a rare opportunity for him to train his physical body. Why would he waste it? When Void saw this, he shook his head. He knew the reason Gray was doing this was to enhance his physical strength. Such a weird person. He thought internally. Gray was not bothered with what Void was thinking. Now, taking out these people was starting to become hard. Due to the force field, any spatial disturbance was easily noticed, even by those with low space sensitivity. If Gray tried to sneak up on them, they would sense him. Void, however, had no such fears. He had the legendary Black Elemental grade, so his space control was way ahead of Gray's. He focused on taking out the scouts, while Gray focused on training his physical body. Time went by, and in 3 more hours, the duo got to the middle, and before them was a spiraling portal. This should be the passage to their realm. The most difficult part of our challenge. Gray said to Void. The place was guarded by 10 peak Overlord Plane elementalists. This showed how important it was. We should watch for now. Gray said. Void had no issues with Gray's decision. Gray sat down and started training his physical body with the pressure he was feeling from the powerful force field. In a place like this, he would advance by leaps and bounds. He could already notice the increase in his physical strength. Void shut his eyes and started cultivating. Gray had always viewed Void's method of cultivation with envy. Unlike others, Void actually used sleep as a method of cultivation. Humans couldn't take this risk because of the fear of their elemental essence passing through the wrong channels and causing severe damages. But Void didn't seem to have such fears as he slept away. 2 hours later. Gray was still cultivating when he heard a noise. Opening his eyes, he looked in the direction of the portal and saw a group of horned men walking over with large cages that were floating behind them. There were over 10 people in each cage. What surprised Gray was the familiar face he saw in them. Aren't those the guys we saw in the first town? He asked Void. He still recalled the face of the man who acted arrogantly just because he was from a faction. He never thought the group would be caught by the people they seemingly thought they were hunting. That arrogant guy on a bird? Void asked to confirm. Gray pointed at the cage holding the group. It's truly him. What a shame, his arrogance couldn't help him in the battle. Void mocked. Gray chuckled when he heard this. The young man tried to look down on Gray when they last saw. Never in his life would he think that he would be the one in a cage, while Gray would be watching from the side. Chapter 783. Gray accessed his options as he watched the people transported into the portal. His chances of getting in and leaving without being noticed were too low. Guess that's it for these guys. He came to the conclusion that he couldn't save the group that were being sent into the portal. If he had companions, powerful companions, then he could take the risk, but heading into a place he had basically no knowledge of was too dangerous for people he had no connections with. As much as he would like to enter, he still didn't dare to. While he was still thinking of the possibilities, he noticed the group of 6 he encountered in the gorge. They were standing in another direction, but they hadn't noticed him yet. He could also see that they were contemplating the matter as well. This realm would definitely have countless peak Overlord plane fighters. If they carelessly charged in there, they would not only risk being caught, but death would also not be too far away. The group continued discussions on the matter, and after a while, Gray saw them bring out a talisman and crush it. After doing this, they sat down calmly and started to talk. Void. Gray called out to Void telepathically. He wanted to know what they had just done. Void nodded and vanished. On the other side, the group of 6 were conversing casually. How long do you think these people have before they are killed? A young lady asked. I don't know, 2 or 3 days. There's also the possibility of being killed instantly. I mainly rely on their luck. A young man replied. They were still speaking when one of them paused and looked in a certain direction. "Gil, what's wrong?" The young man Gray spoke with asked curiously. "I sensed a ripple in space a few seconds ago. It's very faint, but I'm sure of it." The young man referred to as Gil answered. "I guess we have to be extra careful from now on." The young man nodded before giving the others a knowing look and heading in another direction. Void appeared on Gray's shoulder once again before reporting what he heard. Unfortunately, he didn't hear anything good enough. "Why did you come back so quickly?" Gray asked after hearing the small part of the conversation Void heard. "There's a space elementalist in their midst, and his elemental grade is quite high. He sensed me the moment I appeared. I had to leave when he was starting to investigate further." Void replied. "Oh, okay." Gray nodded in understanding before deciding it was best to wait for some time to see what these youths were up to. There is definitely something going on, and since they were waiting, it meant they hadn't given up on the idea of heading into this realm. 6 hours later. Gray finally understood what the youths were up to. He sensed a powerful aura rushing here, and it appeared in the blink of an eye. With the appearance of the figure, all the horned people that were in the place froze, and before they could even move, they were dead. Gray sucked in a cold breath as he stood in shock. He tried to hide his presence, but against someone this powerful, it was nothing more than a joke. The figure looked in his direction, squinting his eyes with a bit of surprise in it. The figure was about to head in his direction when a bright light shot at him. The figure vanished, along with the light. A few minutes later, the figure appeared, but he didn't bother with Gray any longer. With a wave of his hand, he tore through space and a group of youngsters came through it. How powerful is he? Gray could feel his heart beating faster and faster as he watched this mysterious man. Powerful enough to tear through space even when he's not a space elementalist. Void replied. He had no idea what the strength of this man was, but one thing was for sure, this was one of the most powerful figures they had encountered. This man looked to be in his early 30s, but Gray knew not to trust looks. He had dark brown hair with brown eyes. He was well over 6 feet in height, and with a handsome face as well. The youngsters who passed through the space were all in the Overlord plane. The majority of them were in the late stages, with a few in the early stages. The group of 6 he encountered in the gorge came out as well, standing in front of these youngsters. They were clearly the leader of this group. The man said a few words to them before letting them enter the portal. After the group entered the portal, the man stayed for a few minutes before setting up a concealing array around the place to hide its aura from outsiders and then taking his leave. Gray waited for a little over 30 minutes, just to be sure that the man was gone before he headed in the direction of the portal. The force field coming from the portal had reduced significantly thanks to the appearance of the expert. Then he noticed the expert made some changes to the portal. This way, the geniuses sent in wouldn't appear in the location where the horned people would be too much for them. Gray looked around, and after confirming that no one was there, he entered the portal and disappeared. The second he left, the man appeared once again. This time, a familiar face was with him. It was none other than the man who protected him from the necromancer's attack some time ago. "Why are you protecting him?" the man asked. "Nothing of any importance." "Why are you asking?" the man protecting Gray asked. He looked somewhat familiar. "I'm just curious." "With you by his side, I'm sure it has something to do with him, right?" the man asked. "It's best to pretend you didn't see me, for the both of us." The man protecting Gray sighed before looking in the portal. Chapter 784. This place is a gift for Earth elementalists. Gray exclaimed when he felt the abundance of Earth elemental particles in the air. Even the sky was somewhat brownish in color. The force field he was feeling back at the gorge was in no way close to this one. The gravitational power was over 4 times that of the one he felt when he was fighting against the 4 horned men. Staying here would benefit my earth element a lot. Unfortunately, it's too risky, Gray said. This is a good place for us to absorb that treasure. The only risk is attracting too many of them. You can absorb faster than I do, so you could fight against them while I absorb the rest. What do you think? Void asked. He could already feel the limitations of this realm, which meant that there was no one above the Overlord plane, but he knew it didn't mean they should underestimate these horned people. There would be powerful experts with strength exceeding the Overlord plane. Gray thought about Void's suggestion for some time before replying, "Let's check out the place for now. We'll see what happens later on." After coming to a decision, they left their current location. The group brought by the expert were nowhere to be seen. They had left a long time ago. Gray was cautious as he moved around the place. This was the first time he was entering a realm like this. The place he appeared was an empty field. He headed in the eastern direction. He didn't forget to take note of this place, and also placed one of the plaques he made. This way, he could use it to locate this place when he wanted to leave. The portal here vanished after he appeared, but he could still sense it, so he knew he could leave with it if he wanted to. A few hours later, he encountered the first city in this world. The scenery stunned him. Just like humans, these horned people lived in well-built houses. However, that was not what caught his attention. Looking at the front gate to the city, he could see piles of bodies on the side. They were humans. It was as if these people took joy in killing them. He saw kids running over to the place, looking at the dead bodies of the humans with a joyful expression. "Well, this is strange," Void commented. "Looks like humans aren't the only crazy ones." Gray looked at the scene oddly. He didn't really know what to feel since he never expected to see something like this. Although he already knew that the orbs of humans were extracted, he never knew that the humans were killed right after. While he was watching from the side, he saw some group of people bringing a cart full of dead bodies and dumping them there. These bodies were fresh. It was evident that they were killed not too long ago. Can't they just burn or bury the bodies? Gray found the scene a little disturbing. He wasn't uncomfortable because of the dead bodies, but some of them had started to rot. "I have no idea," Void replied. Gray couldn't use the space element fully since the gravity here was different from the Aurora continent, but he sensed that using his Earth element brought double the usual result. He sent Void to go and investigate what was happening inside the place. Void nodded before disappearing. Gray stayed in the same location and started to train his physical body. Void's investigation would take some time, so he had to make sure that he used this opportunity well. Just being here was no different from training his physical body. So when he started training as well, he could feel himself growing stronger as time went on. After some time, he switched to trying to comprehend the gravity in this realm. He had been trying to comprehend it for some time now. When he fought against the 4 horned men, he felt he had gained some insights. Staying here was the push he needed to comprehend it sooner. Later that day, Void appeared beside him with a chubby horned man. Gray opened his eyes and stared at the man in front of him. "Who's this?" he asked curiously. He noticed the man was only in the origin plane, so he knew he wouldn't be anyone of much importance. "The chief of this city," Void replied while smacking the head of the man. The man wanted to speak out, but Void glared at him and he shut his mouth up. "What are you doing with the people brought here?" Gray went straight to the point. He already knew this, but he wanted to be sure of it. "What are you talking about?" the horned man asked, shivering in fright. Gray didn't reply. He moved the bush close to them, and the man saw the pile of bodies heaped on the side of the city gate. The man saw this and looked at Gray once again. "You're one of them," the man exclaimed. "Answer my question." Gray squinted his eyes and released his superior cultivation base on the man. The pressure the man felt made it almost impossible for him to even breathe. My lord, they are goods transported over for entertainment," the chubby man replied. "Entertainment?" Gray was a little confused. He looked at the man, hoping for further explanation. "They fight against the beasts in the arena," the man explained after sensing Gray's gaze. "I thought you guys only extract their orbs once they were caught?" Gray asked. "Well, they have a lot of uses. Some of them are bought on the market and used as slaves. Some are turned into deadly weapons that can wipe out other cities." The man continued his explanation. Listening to the man's explanation, Gray was a little surprised. This had been going on for years now, and surprisingly, humans hadn't been able to locate them until now. Gray asked how the people were transported there, and the man said they were sent from the capital. According to him, all the people captured were taken to the capital, and then those that were weak would be sent to weaker cities. Chapter 785. Gray listened carefully to the man's words before deciding on what to do. "What are you going to do now?" Void asked. "Well, training is the best thing to do. If I can, I will save some people, but I'm not too interested in doing that," Gray replied, not hiding his intentions, even from the horned man. "Wait, why?" Void was a little confused. He knew Gray wasn't a saint who would go around saving people, but he felt since he was here, he would at least try to. "Have you seen what humans do to each other because of greed? This is nothing compared to it. The only thing that would make humans annoyed is the fact that another race is the one oppressing them. Other than that, this is pretty normal," Gray explained. This was something everyone knew. Humans were not kind to each other. Even brothers tend to harm themselves because of personal gains, so it's no surprise other races are doing this to humans. Gray was also sure that these horned people also do the same. Greed is something common in every race. They all want to grow stronger. From the words of the horned man, he could tell that he was annoyed that those with weaker cultivation planes were sent there. This was also a sign of greed. If the horned man was powerful, he wouldn't mind forcefully taking the powerful humans brought to their realm. The horned man looked at Gray, a little stunned by his plainness. Most people would pretend that they wanted to save every member of their race, but Gray wanted to focus on his training while he was here. He was unique, which made the horned man view him in a new light. However, he still knew that his chances of escaping from Gray's hands were minimal. Gray waved his hand and one of the horned men he captured appeared in front of him. This was a horned man in the Overlord plane. His rank was definitely above that of this man. When the chubby horned man saw the man Gray brought out, he hastily dropped to his knees and placed his head on the ground, even though the man was still unconscious. "Oh, looks like they take hierarchy here very seriously," Gray muttered as he splashed water in the face of the horned man. When he woke up, he was stunned. He never thought that he would be able to come back to his home, but here he is. He almost felt like being captured by Gray was all a dream, but when he saw the evil face of Void, he threw that thought to the back of his head. His eyes darted to the chubby man kneeling on the ground. "You may rise," he said in a commanding tone. "I dare not, my lord." The chubby man shivered. HMPH. This is not the time to take these things to the extreme. The man snorted coldly before using his legs to raise the head of the chubby man. Gray watched everything from the side. "All right, since you two are done, I need someone to point me in the direction of the capital," Gray said coolly. "What do you plan to do?" the man he just brought out asked. "Nothing, I'm just here for a tour," Gray answered. The man looked at Gray. He was the one who had been tortured by Gray. Although he didn't say anything, Gray still managed to find his way to this place. He was certain that the last surviving man with him was the one who gave out their location. The man sighed helplessly before looking at the chubby man to ask for their current location. The chubby man told him where they were located, and after making a rough calculation, he pointed Gray in the direction of the capital. According to him, it would take Gray at least 5 days to get there. Gray nodded before looking at the chubby man. "What do I do with you now?" My. Lord, please spare me." I won't." The chubby man was still in the middle of speaking when he froze, as he felt a stinging pain in his chest. He looked down, only to find a hand piercing through his chest. It was none other than the hand of the horned man Gray just brought out. "You're of no use alive," the man stated coldly before ripping out his heart. You see, for personal gains, he didn't mind killing someone from his race. Gray said to Void telepathically. He knew the reason the horned man did this. He wanted to gain a bit of Gray's trust. One thing he knew was that leaving this man alive was not really a threat. The people of this realm would definitely know that humans had managed to enter their world in no time, so even if this chubby man gave him away, it still wasn't all that of a big deal. Gray looked at the horned man for a while, contemplating what to do. He didn't want to kill him now, since the man still had some uses. First of all, there were bound to be abundant earth elemental treasures here. And being someone with such a high rank, the horned man would know the best locations for it. This was his main objective in coming to this place. Saving the humans captured was more like a side quest that he could choose not to do. If he crosses paths with them, he wouldn't mind helping them, but for now, he was going to check out the capital first. He was one person, he couldn't fight against an entire world. The number of peak overlord plane horned men was not something he can take on alone. The fact that they could send so many late-stage overlord plane horned men out proved that. Also, if he were to be trapped in that formation once again, while in this realm, he was almost certain that his fusion state would be his only way out, and he wasn't even confident about that. Chapter 786. Gray knocked out the horned man before he continued the journey. He was not stupid enough to let the man travel with him. Even if the man was under his constant supervision, he didn't know if there was a way they could communicate with others without him knowing. They could easily ambush him, and that would be deadly, even for someone like him. Void was his greatest help here, and he couldn't afford to let Void absorb the treasure since he would sleep after absorbing it. That would leave only him here, which would be very dangerous for him. He didn't know if the restrictions of this realm would stop him from using the talismans he got from his teacher, so the best plan was to avoid encirclement as much as possible. 3 days later. Gray had surprisingly encountered some humans, and their condition was a little saddening, well, to others. He wasn't too bothered with them. Just like what the chubby horned man said, almost all the humans he saw had lost their cultivation, and they were all used as slaves. There were even a few that were being killed by kids. The few that still had their cultivation were all dumped in the arena for a battle against beasts. Winning meant that they could keep their lives. In these 3 days, Gray had infiltrated for cities. Since he was stronger than almost everyone there, it was impossible for them to sense him. He studied how they lived and what they did. One of the things that piqued his interest was a training mechanism they had in a room. It enhanced the gravity in the room. When he tried to remove it, he realized it was part of the ground. It also alerted people around. "I wonder how those guys are doing?" Void asked as they chewed on the flesh of meat. They were currently eating a new delicacy Gray learned in this realm. Surprisingly, the food here was top-notch. He kidnapped the best cook in all the cities he visited and learned from them. He killed them afterwards since he couldn't afford to give away his position. When he sent the first meal to his teacher, the feedback he got was somewhat funny since his teacher said he should prepare only this type of meal for him. According to him, this was the best thing he had tasted in his life, and he had tasted a whole lot of food. Gray informed him about his current location, and his teacher surprisingly only spoke about food. Only telling him to take care of himself after receiving the second round of food. Which of them? Gray asked. The ones we came in here with. Void replied. They should be okay, I guess. I noticed some unrest in the last city we entered. If I'm correct, it should be their doing. They should be searching for the capital, just like us. Gray said his thoughts. Maybe. Void said before emptying the content in his bowl into his mouth. Gray didn't say anything and finished his meal as well. In the space of 3 days, his physical body had improved to the 5th stage of the Overlord plane. The speed of his growth was insane. He was also very close to comprehending the gravitational field. His Earth elemental grade had increased to the blue grade, after years of staying stagnant in the purple grade. This place is great, he thought internally after sensing his growth in only 3 days. He continued his training while Void slept. In the blink of an eye, 3 more days went by. Gray was hiding behind a tree as he stared at the city gate. This city was larger than the previous ones he had seen, and the gravitational force here was way higher than it was in the other cities. The capital, Void said telepathically. Gray nodded before looking in the other direction. He squinted his eyes as he could see some familiar faces. A cart was heading out, and it was a cage that had tens of people inside. The group of geniuses he encountered in the first town, he sensed the attack of the Horned people were here. Oh, to think they weren't killed. How lucky, he said to himself before hiding in the bushes. The cart was being escorted by 6 Horned men in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane, while there were 5 7th and 6th stage Overlord plane Horned men. Altogether, there were 20 people, but the others were of no importance to Gray. You finally want to save some people? Void couldn't help but ask. They're lucky their orbs hadn't been extracted yet, or I would have left them alone. Going back to the Aurora continent without their cultivation base would only send them into depression, wishing for nothing else but death. Gray explained. Void nodded in understanding. These geniuses were already at the top. If they were reduced to normal people, then they might lose their minds. Of course, some would be grateful that they kept their lives. Gray followed the cart for some time, and after almost 5 hours, he deemed it was time for him to attack. This place was far enough, so they wouldn't be able to call for reinforcement. Just as he was about to step out, he sensed something odd and stopped. Inside the cage was another familiar face. It was one of the geniuses he met at the gorge, and the young lady was preparing an attack. He paused and decided to wait by the side. Watching what would happen was the best thing to do, for now. Boom! A loud explosion rang out, but it wasn't from the cage, but from the side of the cart. The cart fell on its side, and the young lady managed to keep everyone from injury since she was already prepared for it. The Horned men never expected an attack, so they were thrown off guard. After this attack, 5 youths jumped out from the woods by the side and attacked. Gray recalled one of them as the young man who seemed to be the leader of the group. Chapter 787. Bang! The group of geniuses attacked the Horned men. One of them rushed over to the cage to free their companion that was inside the cage. Other than the young lady, the rest of the people in the cage were all powerless. Even though their orbs hadn't been extracted, the Horned men used a secret technique to seal their cultivation. The young lady immediately joined the attack the second she was released. Although they were short on fighters, each of them was powerful. Gray was astounded by the strength they were portraying. If not for the fact that the Horned men were fighting in their realm which had an increased gravity, these youngsters would have wiped them out within a few minutes. Even with the suppression of the gravity, each of them was still fighting against 2 or more fighters. They're good, Void complimented, a little dazzled by their performance. If he were pitched against any of them one-on-one, he would be able to defeat them, but it wouldn't be as convincing as his previous battles against people at the peak of the Overlord plane. Gray nodded to his words. The only time he had seen a youth show strength like this was when he was attacked by that young man. The young man suppressed him so much that he could barely move before the attack struck him. Since these people had already stepped out, he decided to stay hidden. If they could defeat them, then he wouldn't need to stress himself about helping. He would only help when he knew it was necessary. The group fought fearlessly. The Horned Men managed to create their formation, and from then on out, the tide of the battle slowly started to change. The increase in gravity was something that the youths could resist, so it made fighting difficult for them. Even with a high elemental grade, they still had problems using elemental attacks. They're in trouble now. Gray muttered to himself, but he didn't step out now, since he felt the ground definitely had a way around this. Time went on, and the Horned Men slowly took the initiative in the battle and started to push the group of 5 back. What Gray noticed was that their expressions were calm. They seemed to be thinking of ways to counter the gravity. Void watched closely, and he noticed that no matter how the Horned Men tried, they still hadn't been able to cause any casualties on the side of the humans, unlike their case where 4 Horned Men were already dead. Of the 4 dead people, 1 was in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane, while 2 were in the 6th stage. The last one was in the 3rd stage of the Overlord plane. The Horned Man in the 9th stage was killed by the young man who was the leader of the group. "Who do you think is more powerful?" Gray asked. Void was there on the day the young man attacked him, so he was certain that he should be able to grade them on their strength. Void didn't need Gray to explain to him since he already knew who he was talking about. "That guy is on another level," he replied truthfully. "I thought the same as well. Anyway, he'll be defeated by me the next time we cross blows," Gray declared confidently. He was sure of his strength. With sufficient time, he would get to the top of the world and look down on everyone else. This was something that was possible not only because he had the special orb in his body, but because of his determination and belief. Void felt Gray's confidence and nodded. He also knew this would happen. They continued watching, and just when Gray felt it was time for him to step in, he noticed a change on the battleground. The group who had been defending all this while suddenly exploded out with a powerful attack that pushed one of the Horned Men back. This gave the young man who was the leader of the group the chance to escape from the formation. The second he came out of the formation, he attacked the weak link in the formation, destroying it in the process. With the formation broken, the others attacked as well. The Horned Men tried to fight back, but given how ferociously the group attacked, they started to suffer casualties once again. "Guess I'm not needed." Gray looked at the battle. He could already predict how it would end. Void, however, shook his head before saying, "Not exactly." "Oh, why'd you say that?" Gray asked curiously. "Just watch. The twist is coming soon." Void chuckled. Gray continued watching the battle. From what Void said, he could already guess that someone powerful was coming, and that person was not on the side of humans. In the space of 3 minutes, only 8 Horned Men were left, and of the 8, 4 were in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane, and the other 4 were in the 7th stage. The young man who was the leader of the geniuses continued fighting at the front, and just as he was about to kill another Horned Man in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane, his expression changed and he retreated quickly. The others followed suit as well. Boom! An explosion came from the ground, and a large beast sprang out. On its head was a Horned Man who had his hands behind his back. The beast was like a beetle, only it looked more ferocious with its large red eyes. The Horned Man looked different when compared to the other ones Gray had seen. He looked a little more like humans with a smaller horn on his head. "That's the problem." Void pointed at the young Horned Man. This Horned Man was already at the peak of the Overlord plane, and Gray was certain that he wasn't as old as these people in the 5th stage. If his guess was correct, then this young Horned Man should be in his late 20s. Gray could sense a pressure from the young Horned Man who just arrived. He never thought that such a figure would be present here. He must be one of the people groomed with the orbs extracted from humans. Gray contemplated. While he was still thinking of the matter, he saw the group of horned men bow to the young horned man who just arrived. HMPH. To think these insects managed to sneak into our world. I guess it's time for you all to die. The young horned man didn't even bother with the group who bowed to him. His entire focus was on the group of 5. Isn't he a little too proud? I mean, they don't even have a sage plane elementalist here. Void was taken aback by the pride the young horned man was showing. Geniuses, guess they're all the same in any race. Believing they're above everyone else. Gray shook his head. But you believe you're above others as well. Void couldn't help but say. I do, but you don't see me saying it whenever I want to fight, do you? Gray asked with a shrug. Void rolled his eyes before focusing on the battle. His eyes twitched before turning to Gray. They vanished from their location as another explosion rang out. Another beast appeared from the ground, and on top it was a young lady, just like the young horned man. She was also different from the others. Why are you hiding, kid? The young lady said. Gray's figure appeared a few meters away as he stared at the young horned lady. He never thought that they would sense them. If not for Void's quick reaction, he would have been caught in that attack. Gray didn't reply, he only directed his gaze in another direction. He could sense for more auras that were on the same level as this duo. The group of 5 he met back at the gorge looked at him, stunned. How did you get in here? The young man who was the leader of the group asked. The same way you did. Gray replied. The young man was about to continue his questioning when one of the young ladies in the group stopped him. This is not the time for these, we have more important things to deal with. She pointed at the group of 6. There were 3 horned men and ladies respectively. Each was at the peak of the Overlord plane, and they all looked to be around the same age. Well, we can take on one each, but can he fight against one on his own? The young man called Gil in the group pointed at Gray. Gray was still in the 7th stage of the Overlord plane, and he felt Gray couldn't even take a blow from him, much less these guys. You don't need to worry about me. Gray replied casually. All right, try not to get in our way. Gil nodded before walking forward. Noted. Chapter 788. The 6 horned people looked at each other before bursting out laughing. You think you can defeat us? I get it when the others want to try, but even you? Ha ha, please, don't make us laugh. One of the horned ladies found Gray's involvement in the battle somewhat funny. Gray didn't say anything since he didn't like explaining himself to stuck-up people. Gil was the first to pick an opponent, and his opponent was none other than the first horned young man who appeared earlier. Gil was a lightning elementalist, and a powerful one at that. His attack speed was on a different level. With Gil being the first to attack, the others joined as well. They all picked an opponent and started fighting against them. The horned young lady who mocked Gray ensured that she would have to be the one who fought against him. Void, keep an eye on those guys, make sure they don't capture the people that have already been saved. Gray said to Void as he rushed forward. Void nodded before jumping off his shoulder. He was Gray's secret weapon, so he had to keep his strength hidden for now. Bam! Gray's fist connected with the fist of the young lady. Nice, but you're still not on my level. The horned lady smiled and increased the force of her punch, which sent Gray flying back. Gray did a backflip mid-air and landed on the ground. The moment his feet touched the ground, his pupils constricted as he saw an arm coming toward his face. He placed both arms around him, and the young horned lady's fist hit them, pushing him back. When he regained his footing, the young horned lady was already in front of him, preparing to attack once again. Gray was placed in a defensive situation from the start of the battle. He was forced to show his space element since without it, the young lady would completely overwhelm him. After appearing behind the horned lady, he punched her solidly on her back, and his fist exploded out with blue flames when his hand connected with her. The force of the attack pushed the Horned Lady back, but she was able to quickly position herself in a way that she didn't leave an opening for Gray. Gray vanished once again, but since the Horned Lady was already aware of this ability of his, she was wary and very sensitive to it. She threw her left fist at the empty space behind her, and Gray appeared there the moment the fist was extended fully, receiving the full brunt of the attack. The attack forced him back once again, but he managed to regain himself quickly. "Damn!" he complained as he looked at the hand he used in blocking the attack. This was the first time he was engaging in a fist battle with someone who had a better physique than he did, so he didn't have the advantage like he usually does. Also, the Horned Lady seemed to be very sensitive to the space element, or maybe it had something to do with the gravity here. Gray was certain that if Void used the space element, he wouldn't be easily noticed compared to him. The young Horned Lady didn't give Gray time and she continued attacking. They exchanged blows for some minutes, and although Gray was mostly on the back foot, he was quite impressive. The others were also in a heated battle, and compared to Gray, their strength was around the same level as that of their opponents, so they were faring pretty well. The main reason the Horned people had the advantage was because this was their home ground, and the increase in gravity was something that affected the general strength of those from a foreign realm. The group that was in the cage had already regained consciousness, and they were watching the battle intently. "Why does that guy look familiar?" one of the young ladies in the group asked, a little bit surprised. She was part of the geniuses Gray met in the first town. With her pointing him out, the others looked as well. Gray had a face that very few would forget after seeing him once, especially when they meet him so quickly again. "Do you remember the guy we met while we were tracking down these people?" the young lady who spoke with Gray at that time asked. The others nodded. "He's the one," she said after seeing that they all recalled their encounter with Gray. When she finished speaking, the others didn't have too much of a change in their reaction, except for the young man who felt he was on top and tried to order Gray around. This wasn't how he expected things to go. Gray was supposed to be the one captured, while he was supposed to be the one fighting to rescue him. There must have been an error in how things were supposed to work. He complained internally. Gray naturally had no idea what was in the head of these people. He was more concerned about how he was going to stay alive. The young Horned Lady was not an easy foe, and when she noticed that Gray wasn't as weak as she initially thought, she started attacking more viciously. He was forced to start using elemental attacks since his physical strength wasn't enough for him to go toe-to-toe with the Horned Lady. Gray's performance astounded the 5 geniuses, especially the one called Gil. They never expected that Gray would be able to hold out against the young Horned Lady. They could all see her strength and knew she was just as powerful as they were, so the fact that Gray is able to keep up even when he's only on the 7th stage of the Overlord plane showed his talent. The group finally stopped looking down on him and decided it was best to take him seriously. Gray might not be on their level in terms of strength, but he was someone that, if placed on the same stage as them, he might be on the same level, if not even stronger than they currently were. Chapter 789. Bang! Gray used the ice technique he was given by the people from the Moonlight faction. An ice cube appeared in the sky and started attacking the young lady he was fighting against. He also attacked with his fire element, while making an inscription made of the lightning element. He was going all out now. The young Horned Lady was a little shaken given the fact that she had to deal with multiple attacks simultaneously. Even someone as powerful as her had to tread carefully. Gray knew this was his chance, so he made a second inscription that used the fire element while gradually making a large array in the area. The young lady might be powerful, but unlike Gray, she had primarily one means of attack, that was physical attacks. They rarely used their elemental attacks. Seeing that someone she regarded as a pest was getting the better of her, the young Horned Lady started to feel a little frustrated. To the surprise of Gray, she started using her elemental attack. She was surprisingly a wind elementalist. With the aid of the wind element, her speed shot up by almost double. She started dodging most of Gray's attacks. Even with the high number of attacking means Gray had, she still managed to dodge most of them. However, she was still hit by a few. "What are you staring at? Distract him." The young Horned Lady was forced to call on the Horned Men that were watching from the side. There were still a few in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane. The Horned Men immediately rushed over and joined in on the battle. The 5 geniuses were stunned by the fact that Gray was able to use so many methods in attacking. Even though he was weaker, he could use all this to complement his weaknesses. They were still in a stalemate with their opponents, yet Gray had forced his opponent into calling for reinforcement. Fighting against Gray was a little unfair since it felt like he was more than one person. Gray's space element already made him a difficult opponent, having all this as well made him overpowered. The group of Horned Men joined the battle. Gray didn't feel any pressure with them joining the battle because he had already completed his array at the time they joined the battle. Now, he could move freely as much as he wanted. One of the men rushed towards him, and he didn't escape. Instead, he raised his hand, and the man rushing over felt a suction force, and before he knew it, he flew off the ground, heading in Gray's direction. Bam! Gray's fist connected solidly with the head of the man. The force of the blow sent the Horned Man flying, crashing into 2 more men. They were still in the midst of trying to understand what happened when Gray appeared in their midst and spread out his hands. All 3 Horned Men were sent flying by a mysterious force. Gray vanished once again, and he appeared behind one of the men that was still mid-air. A fireball that had bits of lightning in it hit the body of the Horned Man. An explosion rang out, and the body of the Horned Man's figure slammed into the ground. Gray was already gone by the time the attack connected. He appeared close to another Horned Man and grabbed his leg. With a powerful tug, he dragged him and slammed him into the ground. Just as the body of the man slammed into the ground, Gray vanished once again and appeared close to the 3rd Horned Man he sent flying. A black orb appeared on the tip of his finger. This orb was no bigger than the size of a human eyeball. He dropped the orb on the body of the man, and the most shocking thing happened. The body of the man started to distort in a strange pattern, and before long, the man disappeared from view. Other than his horn, there was no evidence that he was there in the first place. In the space of barely 5 seconds, Gray just took out 3 Horned Men. 2 of those 3 Horned Men killed were in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane. The young Horned Lady sucked in a deep breath of air. She couldn't believe what she just witnessed. Is this the same person that was having a hard time fighting against me? She couldn't help but ask. The speed of Gray's attacks, and how everything flowed was amazing to watch. The 5 geniuses he met in the gorge were speechless. Their mouths were wide open, astonished. Gray's strength stunned them all. It was as if Gray went from a normal person to a master in the space of a few seconds. The contrast was just too much. Even the Horned Men froze and stared at Gray, trying to figure out if he was the one attacking or not. His speed was on another level, and his attacks were more terrifying. Of all the attacks he used, the last one sent chills down the spines of everyone present. Even the humans who were on his side were a little afraid just thinking of the possibility of being hit by such an attack. How? Gil asked in shock. There's an array on the ground. He used it to increase his teleportation speed. In that array, even we would have a difficult time fighting against him. One of the young ladies in the group who was proficient in arrays was quick to sense the array Gray was using. Oh, he's even good at arrays? Gil asked, confused. He's an inscriber, what do you expect? The young lady rolled her eyes. She already knew Gray was good at arrays when she saw him using the inscriptions, but she never knew he would be able to use it in this manner. Gray truly was a talent. If well groomed, they knew he would be above them in terms of strength. At this moment, they couldn't help but wonder which faction he was from, or which family was able to produce such a monster. Chapter 790. During all the silence, Gray moved once again. This was an opportunity for him, he wasn't going to waste it. Initially, only 5 horned men came forth after the young horned lady's call, but after he took out 3, 2 were left, and the 3 who were by the side were forced to rush in, even though they were a little afraid. The young horned lady came to her senses and attacked Gray as well. She couldn't give him the chance to build on his momentum. She blocked Gray from attacking the horned men so they could prepare a formation. But with the array in place, Gray had no problems with going wherever he wanted around this area. He vanished and appeared behind one of the horned men. The man turned around to block the attack, but he was still sent flying by the impact of the attack. Gray followed him and continued his assault. Unfortunately, he was unable to take him out since the young horned lady intercepted. Gray didn't fight against her, he moved to the side to evade her attack before targeting another horned man from the 5 alive. His speed in teleportation made him such a difficult foe. When he was fighting against only the young horned lady, he mainly focused on fighting, but with more people available, he thrived from his unpredictability. The others had continued their fighting as well, but they still took quick glances at Gray's situation from time to time. As things stand, that battle seemed to hold the key in on how long the fight would last in general. If Gray is able to defeat his opponent, then he could lend a helping hand to the others to make things easier. If his opponent won, then she would do the same. The young horned lady raced after Gray, but her speed was not on the same level as Gray's teleportation speed. Don't come close, he created a formation that's helping him. She finally sensed the array and warned the 5 horned men that were being attacked by Gray. Even with the young horned lady rushing to their rescue, Gray had been able to hit all of them more than once. Some of them were already injured, but they could still fight. The horned men left the region where Gray's array covered, leaving only the young horned lady there. Gray could only shake his head in pity before focusing on the young horned lady. However, he realized that the group of horned men spread out in a formation he was familiar with, and before he could even stop them, they had unleashed their formation. In this place, the effect of the formation was on a whole different level. He could feel the weight on his body increase significantly, and even the use of his element started to become a little harder. The inscription he had set up vanished the second the formation was set. "I really hate this thing." He couldn't help but complain. This was what he had been trying to avoid, but now, the horned men got the chance they were waiting for. The young horned lady used the opportunity and charged at Gray. All she wanted to do right now was to beat the hell out of him. She felt embarrassed by the fact that she had to struggle against Gray, who seemed to be the weakest out of the 6 people present. She even took the initiative to force him out of his hiding place. Never did she imagine Gray would place her in such a position. Gray, seeing the young horned lady charging towards him, didn't panic. He knew he wasn't her match physically, so he didn't try to fight her head-on. He blinked and appeared on the left side of the young horned lady and threw out a fist. The young horned lady reacted promptly and blocked before countering with a blow of her own. Gray's figure blurred once again as he vanished from his spot. Even though he could still switch positions quickly, the young horned lady was able to sense the ripples in space now, thanks to the help of the array. Time went on and Gray and the young lady had exchanged countless blows. He didn't have the advantage, but neither did the young lady. The young horned lady finally got an opportunity and unleashed a barrage of attacks on Gray. Gray was a little shaken on the inside after suffering from the powerful attacks, but he secretly used his darkness element to block his pain receptors, so even though his innards were rocked, he didn't show it out. After surviving the barrage of attacks, Gray knew staying in the formation was dangerous. While he was in the formation, the 5 geniuses had tried to free themselves so they could help him disrupt the formation, but they were unable to since their opponents knew Gray played a vital role in the battle. Seeing the young horned lady's assault on Gray, and the bit of blood on the side of his mouth, they felt it was only a matter of time before he would be defeated. They were still trying to push their opponents back so they could help out. The young man who was the leader of the group finally managed to do so, and just before he got to where one of the horned men that made the formation was, he witnessed something unbelievable. Gray's figure blinked, and compared to before where he would appear in another location, his figure actually changed to that of one of the horned men. The young horned lady was attacking at that moment, so she attacked the horned man that appeared there. The young man looked around and noticed that the formation had been broken, and Gray was standing in the position of one of the horned men. He switched places with one of them. Incredible! The young man couldn't help but comment. Since Gray was fine, he rushed back to his battle. His opponent was already on the verge of attacking, so he couldn't be bothered with Gray's safety any longer. The battle raged on, and it entered its final stages. Of the geniuses on the human side, Gray and the young man who was the leader were the only two who had a clear advantage over their opponents. Gray's opponent was stronger than he was, but Gray was too technical for her. Chapter 791. Bang! Gray's fire and lightning orb attack exploded out and encompassed the remaining 4 horned men, as well as the horned lady. The man he switched places with was already on the ground since the young horned lady was unable to retract her attack on time. He used this opportunity to attack the 4 horned men that made up the rest of the formation. The formation was already on the verge of breaking, so his attack did the trick. The 4 horned men were quickly taken care of before the young horned lady could regain herself. Void was still watching the battle from the side, with no plans of stepping in to help. He wasn't needed anyway, so there was no need for him to step in. After Gray took out the 4 horned men, he was left with only the young horned lady. With the help of his array, he blinked so much that the young horned lady couldn't keep up with his speed. She soon gave up and attacked wildly with her wind element in hopes of hitting Gray with one of the attacks. Gray dodged the attack and slowly started to attack her. Since she had a very tough defense, Gray turned to the darkness element. He would slowly use it to corrode her without her knowledge. As time went on, she would start to lose her strength, and before long, she would die as long as she didn't escape. 2 minutes later, he had infected her with enough darkness element that she started to feel tired. He didn't stop there. With the young horned lady sensing her decrease in strength, she quickly realized something was wrong, and without even thinking, she turned around and fled. The beast she brought with her was already long dead, so she had to run on her own. Gray didn't try to stop her since he knew he had done just enough to at least cripple her for life. That's if she escaped death, that is. The darkness element was an evil element when placed in the hands of a mad genius. After coming in contact with so many necromancers, and doing a bit of research for himself with the puppet corpses he acquired, he got to know a thing or two about the body. He knew where to infuse more darkness element that would make it fatal. Even if a sage plane elementalist were to come to the aid of the young horned lady, there was very little they could do to help her. Keeping her alive would already be a good result. Gray watched her leave before turning to the battle closest to him. He couldn't stand by and watch the others get beaten. Of the 5 geniuses, only 2 now had a clear advantage over their opponents, the young man who seemed to be the leader of the group, and the young man named Gil. The person fighting close to him was a young lady. She was still in a stalemate with her opponent, but she knew if not for the suppression of the gravity, she would have been able to take him out. The young horned lady's escape alerted all of them, and they knew the battle had taken a turn for the worse for them. They tried escaping, but the geniuses didn't give them the chance to. Gray quickly joined in on the attack, and he was able to injure the horned young man within a few seconds of involvement. He didn't forget to send in tendrils of darkness element to tweak the body of the young man, ensuring that he wouldn't be able to survive this. Void, follow them. We can't allow such valuable horns to go wasted now, can we? Gray said as he moved to the next target. The young horned man fled when he noticed his strength was leaving his body from his injury. 10 minutes later, the last horned young lady was unable to escape, the reason being that since the others were already free, there was no way they could let her escape. Why are you intentionally letting them escape? the first young lady among the geniuses he helped questioned. They would have been able to kill them, but for some reason, once the Horned Man is wounded by Gray, he would present an opportunity for him to escape. Relax, they wouldn't go too far. Gray's reply was casual. His real motive, though, was to ensure that he got all the horns to himself. And he didn't want to use too much of his strength since he knew that there would be more battles to be fought. Besides, he still had to be cautious of this group. You don't have to worry about that. We now know the abilities of the people groomed with the orbs. If I'm not mistaken, there would be others stronger than these guys. The young man who was the leader of the group interrupted the young lady as she was about to continue her questioning. Thank you for your help. He turned to Gray. I only fought because they forced me out. Gray didn't hide his intentions. If he wasn't forced out by the young horned lady, he wouldn't mind watching the battle from the side. He was certain that these geniuses wouldn't lose so easily, even though only 2 of them were able to gain the advantage in the fight. He felt, just like him, they were also hiding their strength. Gray's words took them by surprise since they felt that he would try to say something along the lines of fighting for humanity. The fact that he stated his mind made this group look at him in a new light. It doesn't matter, you still helped us, and we're grateful for that. The young man said. You would have been fine anyway. Gray muttered, although in a low voice, the group heard it clearly. Gil laughed before saying, I like this guy. Gray's honesty made him different from many geniuses their age. They could tell that when he said this, he wasn't trying to bootlick them or anything, he just stated what he felt was the truth. Chapter 792. You saved us. The young lady in the cage that was with the group who crossed paths with Gray at the town he first noticed the activity of the Horned race approached him. She had seen him, so she felt it would be better to meet him first before thanking the others. They did, I was only watching from the side. Gray pointed at Gil and his group. Even though he wanted to try to save them from the start, he still wasn't the one who did it in the end, he only offered some assistance after he was forced out. The young lady didn't know how to respond after Gray said these words. She only wanted to thank him, but she never thought he wouldn't accept her gratitude. She could only awkwardly bow and say, You lent a helping hand, so you contributed to it. Thanks for doing that. After saying this, she turned to the group of 5 and thanked them wholeheartedly. Gray didn't want this, and she knew it would be wrong not to appreciate these people since they were the main instigators of their rescue. It's okay, we were only fighting for humanity. The young man who was the leader of the group said. While they were still speaking, Gray used the opportunity to leave. He didn't like being around new people, well, people in general, except for a selected few. Hey! Gil was the first person who noticed Gray was leaving. He drew the attention of the others to it. Gray paused and looked at them. Is there anything I can help you with? We plan on raiding the capital, and we would need someone like you. With your space element, you would be of great use. The young man who was the leader of the group told Gray their plans. The capital? Gray asked with a raised brow. The young man nodded. Gray thought about it before asking, what about the top-level experts there? We have our means of going undetected. How do you think we were able to sneak her in? The young man pointed at the young lady who was part of those kept in the cage that was being transported out. Fair point. Anyway, I'm not interested in that. There's a reason I came here, and although I'm quite tempted by the offer of raiding the capital, I don't really trust you people enough to team up with you on a potentially dangerous mission. Gray didn't mince his words, he didn't trust them, so why would he go on a mission with them? What if after acquiring the treasures, they decide to attack him and take his share of the treasure? These geniuses weren't people he could deal with alone. Fighting against one might be something he could still do, but once 2 or more are involved, fleeing would be his only option. If I recall correctly, more of your people came in here as well, you can team up with them. he added before leaving decisively. There was no use in staying behind. He knew they understood the meaning of his words. Such a cautious figure. A shame he couldn't help us though, and I really liked him. Gil shook his head in pity. They naturally understood what he meant by his words. Gray was alone, and they were already 5. If they added the others who came here with them, their numbers would go up by 10. No matter how powerful Gray was, he wouldn't be able to fight against them. If they were regular geniuses like the type caught by the Horned Men, then Gray would have a good chance, but against them, he didn't fancy his chances at all. Who? Where's the corpse? One of the 5 noticed the corpse of the horned young lady they killed was no longer there. They looked around and noticed it was the same for the other corpses as well. Every single corpse from the horned race was nowhere to be seen. They couldn't help but turn to look in the direction Gray headed. He was their biggest suspect. They were here when he left. Someone spoke out from the group saved. It was surprisingly the young man who wanted to order Gray when they met in the town. Never would he think that he would stand up for Gray, but he naturally couldn't let these people accuse him while he's innocent. Then who took them? The young lady who noticed the disappearance of the corpses asked. Look closely, and you'll see they all went underground. The young man responded. When they looked at it, they couldn't help but notice the slight change in the ground. While fighting, Gray avoided using the earth element and substituted it with the water element, so none of them knew he had the earth element as part of his arsenal. He had already shown 4 elements, so they would never expect that he had 5. When he used the darkness element, he made sure to be as subtle as possible, so they wouldn't notice it. Before leaving, he marked all the spots where the corpses were. So after getting to around 500 meters, he used the earth element to swoop them away. Compared to when he's in the Aurora continent, his reach with the earth element here was insane. It could travel almost 1 kilometer. A few kilometers away, Gray and Void were staring at all the horns they had gotten from the Horned Men killed. This is a nice haul. I still don't know where we can sell them though. Gray commented with a pleased smile. Didn't you learn forge mastering? Void asked. Well, I'm still in the basics. And I haven't even attempted anything relating to it in a long time now. Gray explained. You still have those books I took from the academy for you? Void inquired. Yeah, they're somewhere in my ring. Gray nodded. The duo continued their conversation as they headed back towards the capital once again. He still had plans of searching for treasures there. He wouldn't be the one going. With Void's strength, it would be very difficult for anyone here to sense him. So he could basically go in and out at will. Chapter 793. Outside the Horned Race capital. Gray hid behind a bush close to the capital gates. Void, try to see if there are any valuable treasures here. Void nodded and vanished. With Void gone, Gray started his training once again. This time, he focused on comprehending the earth element. Since he was in a great place like this, there was no use in trying any other element. Time went by, and after half a day, Void came back with a broad smile. What did you get? Gray couldn't help but ask. Nothing. Void replied, still smiling. Then why the hell are you smiling? Gray looked at him suspiciously. There was no way Void would be happy if he didn't get anything. Because I got vital information about a treasure. We can head there right now. Void said excitedly. This was one of the things he enjoyed doing, treasure hunting. Okay, where is it located? Gray asked. About that, I think they said something about a white desert, don't know where it is. Void replied with a thoughtful expression. White desert? Gray was a little curious. He didn't waste any time and brought out the Horned Man he captured. Where's the White Desert located? He questioned. How do you know about that place? The Horned Man asked, stunned. He never expected that Gray would have been able to find out so many things about their race already. Answer the question, I don't have time for all this. Gray's expression went cold, as killing intent seeped out of his body. Where are we? The Horned Man asked, a little fearful of Gray's terrifying killing intent. What does that have to do with what I asked you? Gray studied the Horned Man closely. There's no way I can point you in the direction if I have no clue about where we are. The Horned Man explained. Fair point. Void, knock him out and get a map. Gray said. Wait. Bang! The Horned Man was still in the middle of trying to plead with Gray before Void brought out a large mace and knocked him out. Where did you even get that? Gray asked, since this was his first time seeing it with Void. Pretty handy, right? Void asked with a smile as he swung the mace, which was bigger than his body. I got it some time ago, before leaving the Azure continent. I've used it a few times as well, he added. Gray shook his head before keeping the body of the Horned Man back in his storage ring. Void soon went back into the city and took a map from one of the stores. No one even noticed when he got in and out. After bringing the map, Gray brought out the Horned Man once again and woke him. Here, point it out. Gray tossed the map at the Horned Man. The Horned Man grabbed the map and a glint flashed through his eyes. Without wasting any time, and the fear of Void who held the mace behind him, he pointed at the position where the White Desert was located on the map. Gray nodded at Void, and before the Horned Man could even say a word, the mace landed on his head, and he was out cold once again. I love this. Void laughed as he played with the mace. Gray chuckled before facing the direction the Horned Man showed him. If by any chance the Horned Man tricked him, he would kill him on the spot. He was sure that the Horned Man knew this as well. Void appeared on his shoulder and they started their journey once again, leaving the capital. From the map, the location the Horned Man pointed out was quite some distance away from their current location. If they moved in the same manner they did when coming to the capital, then they would take around 1 week or so. However, Gray was already getting used to the place, so they moved quickly. The journey took them around 3 days, almost 4 days to be precise. Gray looked at the map before looking at their current location. He didn't rush to the place the Horned Man pointed at him because he didn't trust him entirely. He gave Void a knowing glance and Void disappeared. 30 minutes later, he came back with an odd expression. Apparently, the White Desert isn't white, he said. He captured one of the people there and found out the White Desert was actually a secret organization. Only the top powerhouses in the race knew of it. This was the place where they kept all their treasures, including the orbs extracted from humans. After extracting the orb, they would go through multiple refining before the selected geniuses would get to use it. How did you know of this White Desert anyway? Gray couldn't help but ask. Void brought out his mace once again, before taking out a Horned Man who looked to be on the verge of death. The Horned Man didn't even have the usual look Horned Men had. What did you do to him? Gray was forced to ask, even he found the look of the man to be horrendous. Interrogation. Void replied before hitting the Horned Man with the mace once again. He isn't even conscious yet. Gray felt pity for the Horned Man. I know, I'm just making sure he's out. Void grinned. You're almost no different from Klaus. Gray shook his head. I wish he were here, things would have been better. Void sighed, a little sad that the group separated before they found this place. Are there any powerful experts there? Gray turned his attention to the matter that brought him here. According to what Void found out, there were treasures here. He naturally had no use for the orbs that were extracted from humans, but there would definitely be things of value to him there. Void gave him a detailed overview of the place. It was a secret base underground with multiple levels. This place was a secluded place to begin with, so no one would know there was a large tunnel underground. Chapter 794. Gray and Void camped outside the place for some time while Void told Gray what he knew of the place. From what he was able to sense, there were about 20 peak overlord plane experts in the place. Not just that, but the gravity there was almost 4 times what it was outside. This was done probably to ward off intruders, and also as a surveillance system. Void didn't really know too much about it. It will be hard, but it's not impossible. If I use my fusion state, I can take on a few and also escape unscathed. However, that will give my trump card away. Gray contemplated after Void filled him in on the information of the place. Why don't I go alone, grab what I can then leave? Void suggested. That's not a bad idea, but I would like to see the facility there. Maybe there might be something I can learn from them. Gray replied. Gray didn't mind learning from even an ant, so it was not a surprise that he wanted to learn a thing or two from this race. He had studied some of the techniques of necromancers, although he hasn't been able to go deep since there are things that he would need to know. Some hours later, they finally came up with a plan. Void would go in and cause a ruckus. Once he has attracted the attention of those inside, Gray would then go in and try to see what he could find. After coming to a conclusion, they acted on their plan immediately. Void went in, and within a few seconds, the sounds of explosions started ringing from the ground. Gray waited for Void's order before going in. A minute later, Void told him he could go in. Gray vanished from his spot and appeared inside the tunnel underground. The place was brightly lit with luminous stones embedded on the walls. He followed the path Void directed and he soon appeared in an empty space. There were multiple horned men there, and inside some large tubes, there were some horned youths who seemed to be sleeping. So this is how they put the orbs in them. He thought as he looked at what was happening. He didn't stay there for long since he had other things to do. Moving through the tunnel quickly, he avoided all the horned men he encountered. Luckily, they were all around the origin plane, so none of them could sense him. Void had successfully dragged away all the overlord plane horned experts there. Gray didn't put his full trust in this since the horned people could leave some people behind. In fact, this was well within his expectations. He moved through the corridors quickly, spreading out his spiritual senses to cover as much as he could. Wherever he sensed any abnormalities, he would go in to investigate it. Time slowly went by, and in 5 minutes, other than the orbs extracted from humans, some humans who were captured, and the horned youths he saw who were in the middle of assimilating with the orbs, he hadn't found anything of interest to him. He soon got to the deepest part of the underground organization, and he noticed the gravity there was increasingly getting stronger. Something must definitely be here. His eyes sparkled as he rushed down. He increased his cautiousness to the peak since he knew this would be the most guarded place in the entire underground. Before he traveled within 20 meters, he noticed a change, and his expression couldn't help but change. "We've been waiting for you." Gray heard a voice and quickly retreated. When he saw the people in front of him, his pupils shrunk. A few hours back. After Gray brought out the horned man to question him about the White Desert and left. 2 figures appeared on the spot Gray and Void were hiding. The 2 figures had the same appearance as that of the horned man Gray brought out from questioning. The only difference was that they had different horn colors. "Brother was here," one of the figures said. He left a secret message. "Looks like he was captured," the other figure replied. One of the 2 figures had blue horns, while the other one had black horns. "A space elementalist has him," the figure with black horns said. "Tricky. Can you track him?" the one with blue horns asked. The figure with black horns closed his eyes for a few seconds, and after opening his eyes, he looked in the direction Gray and Void headed. "If we had come a little later, then I wouldn't have been able to find him. The one with black horns replied with a smile. You were the one who said we should wait a little longer. The one with blue horns couldn't help but complain. Coming too soon will put brother in danger. Don't worry, if my guess is correct, then they should be headed towards the White Desert. The black-horned man said. All right. But we should be sure of this before we make our move. The blue-horned man nodded. He didn't doubt his brother since they had gone on countless missions together. I wonder if it's one of those humans who sneaked in, or maybe it's one of our people. The black-horned man said with a chuckle. We'll find out soon enough. The blue-horned man said before the duo vanished. They tracked Gray and Void without the knowledge of the duo. They didn't get close to them since they didn't want to alert them. Even though this meant that they wouldn't know if the person or people they were chasing was human or not. After 3 days, they finally confirmed that the people they were chasing were heading to the White Desert. They immediately removed humans from their suspect list since there was no way they would be able to know of this. According to what they know, the humans hadn't been there for long. They went ahead of Gray and Void and entered the White Desert, preparing for the people coming. Chapter 795. After the blue and black-horned men went underground, the black-horned man infused the space element into the formation they made in the place. This would enable him to sense any slight ripple in the space. When Void entered for the first time, he managed to sense it. But he opted to wait and see what they wanted to do. After Void left the place, he knew this person who entered only came to scout the place. They waited for some time before he sensed Void entering the place once again. This time, Void caused a ruckus which attracted the attention of everyone there. They quickly picked up on what they were trying to do. Gray looked at the two figures in front of him in shock. They looked completely identical to the horned man he had in his possession. A human boy, how interesting. The black-horned man said with a smile. Hand brother over, now. The blue-horned man ordered. Oh, so he was the one who gave us away. I never trusted him. Gray muttered. He didn't have any signs of panic contrary to the expectations of the horned men. In fact, he was extremely calm. It was as if he knew something like this would happen. You knew we sensed you people? The black-horned man asked curiously. Not entirely, but I've always been the cautious type. I assumed there must be a way he would contact his people without me knowing, so since I brought him out, I've been expecting people as well. Gray replied truthfully. You knew yet you walked in here. You must have a death wish or something. The blue-horned man scoffed. Nope, I have a bargaining chip. If you come this far just for him, then it means he's important to you. Gray was still speaking when he recalled something and he couldn't help but smack his head with a grin. Is even your brother? This makes things even easier. The horned men never thought that Gray would think of something like that. Listen here, boy, I don't know how you managed to capture our brother, but if you want to leave here alive, you will hand him over. The black-horned man said coldly. I can leave here alive, with or without your help. What I want to know is what is down there. Gray pointed down the tunnel. It's not something a little brat like yourself should concern yourself with. Hand him over and we will let you go. The blue-horned man started to emit intense killing intent, hoping to frighten Gray with it. After all, Gray still had their brother in his custody. All right, I guess I'll have to go on my own. Gray smiled and took a step forward, to the bewilderment of the horned men. Gray's confidence scared them. For someone who looked so young, they didn't expect him to be this bold. I'm done playing. The blue-horned man charged at Gray and attacked. Gray was already prepared for this and took a defensive position. Just as the blue-horned man's fist was about to hit Gray, he vanished. Gray was a little taken aback, but within a split second, the blue-horned man appeared on his right, and his fist connected with Gray's body. The force of the blow sent Gray crashing into the wall by the side, causing a deep crater in it. The two brothers looked at each other with a smile. SS. I never thought I would fall for something like this. A trick I use frequently, a shame. They heard Gray's voice from the crater with a sigh. They could tell that he didn't sound hurt at all. Gray crawled out of the crater before looking at himself. Damn, you broke it. He couldn't help but complain. Over time, he had managed to acquire another defensive artifact. It was just like the blue vest, only it was stronger and very small. This was what helped him out in receiving the blow just now. Unfortunately, it was already weakened, and this blow broke it in two. I see you have some ways to protect yourself, the black-horned man said. Gray didn't reply. Instead, he took on an attacking pose and launched at the blue-horned man who was closest to him. The blue-horned man wasn't the least bit afraid of Gray. He was already in the 9th stage of the Overlord plane, and he was very close to the peak. With his brother by his side, they could even defeat a peak Overlord plane elementalists, much less Gray who was still in the 7th stage. They engaged in a fist fight, and the black-horned man didn't do anything to intervene since he didn't see a need to. His brother had the advantage from the start of the fist fight. Although, he was quite impressed with Gray's performance. For someone in the 7th stage to match up to his brother was nothing short of impressive. The battle continued and Gray started to get hit by the blue-horned man more frequently. He couldn't help but start to use his elemental attacks. With the addition of his elemental attacks, he managed to force back the blue-horned man. However, it wasn't for long since the blue-horned man started to use his element as well. He was a water elementalist as his horn color showed. Unlike humans, the horned race didn't have too many great techniques for their element since they mainly focus on physical battle. But the horned man was able to use his elements fairly well. When the black-horned man sensed that Gray was starting to take the upper hand in the battle, he joined in on the battle as well. Now, he finally knew why Gray was able to capture their brother. Individually, Gray was stronger than they were. This meant that if he fought any of them alone, he would win. The black-horned man started to use the space element to its full effect. Gray naturally didn't let him get the full advantage since he was also a space elementalist. Chapter 796. Gray fought against the duo for some time and he wasn't at a disadvantage. The black-horned man might have good spatial prowess, but there were not enough techniques for him to properly utilize it. Ultimately, it all came down to the fact that they mostly used their physical strength for battle. When the duo noticed that Gray was not at a disadvantage against them, their shock started to turn to fear. Gray was still in the 7th stage of the Overlord plane. If he managed to get to the peak of the Overlord plane, then he could move unhindered in this place. Someone like Gray was a catastrophe for their race, especially given how they treated humans. Unknown to them, Gray didn't really care about how they treated humans. As long as they didn't bother him, he wouldn't be too concerned about them. The duo exchanged glances and finally knew it was time to seek help from others. They initially didn't want to since it would put the life of their brother at risk, but if they didn't, their brother wouldn't be the only one at risk, the entire race would also be at risk. While they were fighting, Gray was already making contingency plans in case more people from the horned race came. Seeing that no one was coming even after their fight had lasted over 3 minutes, he knew the brothers didn't want others to find out he was here. I don't know if I should thank them or laugh at them. He snickered internally. Void was still running rampant on the other side, so he was safe here. Gray's eyes darted around, and when he sensed the slight hesitation in the eyes of the horned men, he knew they were already thinking of ways to stop him. Hey! I would be stupid to let such an opportunity go. He sneered before unleashing his full strength. In the blink of an eye, Gray's aura shot from the 7th stage to the peak of the Overlord plane. It was suffocating for the duo. The pressure Gray gave them wasn't something a peak Overlord plane elementalist should have. They were forced to retreat at that moment. Gray utilized the fusion state for 2 purposes: 1, to take out the duo quickly; 2, he really wanted to see how strong he was now. From his aura alone, he could feel immense strength brimming in his body. Even his physical strength saw a boost as well. The Black Horned Man was the first to try to escape. However, Gray stretched his hand and dragged the Black Horned Man right out of the space tunnel he was using to escape. The Blue Horned Man stared at the scene in shock. His brother could escape from anyone as long as he had entered his space tunnels, yet Gray was able to force him out so easily. When they noticed that there was no way for them to escape from the current Gray, they decided to go all out as well. The duo started to merge in a weird yet interesting way. Gray watched since he found the merger to be interesting. He didn't try to stop them or anything. A few seconds later, the duo merged and their strength shot to the peak of the Overlord plane. Gray could tell just from looking at them that there was something missing. Their brother. I see, if all three are present, they would combine their strength and have terrifying power. Interesting. He narrowed his eyes as his brain went into overdrive. The three brothers piqued his interest. From the moment he saw this, he eliminated the idea of killing them. He wanted to study what made this possible. The only times he had seen something like this was when people made an array that would add their strength together. Never had he actually seen two humans merge together to become one before. After the brothers merged, Gray noticed the change in their aura. The Horned Man in front of him was currently well over 2 meters tall, and the horns were a mixture of both blue and black. On the chin of the man, there was a line that seemed to indicate that there was a merger there. Gray rushed at them. He didn't have all the time in the world to begin with. The Horned Man attacked when he saw Gray coming. The strength of his attack had reached new heights, far exceeding that of the previous duo individually. Even in the fusion state, Gray's physical strength was not on the same level as the Horned Man. However, he used his elemental abilities to complement this. They quickly exchanged blows and the tunnel vibrated continuously. At this rate, Gray was certain that others at the peak of the Overlord plane who were chasing Void would sense their battle and rush over. An orb appeared in his hand. It was made of 3 different elements: fire, lightning, and space. Since he learned space elemental attacks, it had been one of his most deadly means of attacking. He threw the orb at the Horned Man. When the Horned Man saw the orb, he could already feel how powerful it was. He knew he couldn't afford to be careless. I wonder who is in charge, the space guy, or the water guy? Gray muttered, a little curious. Since they combined, he found this to be an issue for some time now. They were obviously 2 different people, so their thought processes would also be different. Well, so he thought. He was taken aback when he saw how they calmly dealt with the orb. The space elementalist was definitely the one who took care of it. Their understanding is already on this level. I see. Gray watched his attack being destroyed by the effort of the duo. It's time to end this. He muttered as an ice cube appeared above him. This was the attack he got from the Moonlight faction. After the ice cube appeared, he also created 2 inscriptions before charging at the Horned Man. A 3-pronged attack, deadly, and very effective, especially against a single opponent. Chapter 797. Gray stood alone in the tunnel. Below him were the 2 Horned Men who had been beaten out cold. Their current appearance was a shadow of their former self. Not bad, but 2 minds will always be different, he said before grabbing them, and just like the first Horned Man, he kept them in his storage ring. What he found interesting was that he naturally couldn't keep living things in his storage ring. Void could, but he couldn't. However, concerning the Horned race, there seemed to be different anatomy that made this possible. He planned to look deep into this after leaving this realm. This could also be the reason why they were able to merge together and form a stronger individual. After keeping the duo, he headed deeper into the place. His target was still the same thing, whatever was sending out such powerful fluctuations. Void had already alerted him that some experts at the peak of the Overlord plane were rushing in his direction. He had tried everything he could to stop them, but they realized it was all a ruse to get their attention. Gray didn't feel too bothered by this. Since he was in his fusion state, he could leave this place in the blink of an eye. He soon got to where the aura was coming from, and in front of him was a brown sphere that was pulsating like a human heart. The amount of earth elemental essence it was emitting was frightening. Even someone as calm as Gray couldn't help but salivate at the thought of acquiring it. Jackpot! I've struck gold! He exclaimed internally before rushing over. This wasn't something he should waste his time on. He grabbed it and shoved it in his storage ring, the entirety of it. He didn't even try to be cautious with it. After doing this, he sensed that the gravity in the place dropped significantly. It was almost at the same level as the one above ground. So this is what increased the gravity here. He vanished right after. If the experts rushing here managed to meet him here, they wouldn't mind risking their lives just to stop him. Gray, on the other hand, didn't care if this was all he got. All he knew was that it would be worth it. Void was already out by the time he came out, so the duo fled as far as they could for the time being before searching for a place to rest. After resting, they continued their journey. PDNV Gray wasn't in a hurry to take out his loot. This was because he felt they were still too close to the underground facility, even though they had gone thousands of kilometers away from it. After 2 days, he finally got to a place he felt was safe enough for him to use the sphere. Void felt a little tinge of sadness because he also had a treasure he wanted to absorb, but since they couldn't use it for now, he had to wait. Gray created some arrays to hide his presence before he started his cultivation. According to his usual absorption speed, this would take him nothing less than a day to completely absorb. Void went outside to stand guard while Gray focused fully on cultivating. Time went by and the next day came. Void was relaxing when he sensed a strong aura coming from the cave Gray used in cultivating. Must he always cause a fuss when breaking through? He complained internally, but he felt genuinely happy that Gray's strength had improved. The stronger Gray grew, the better for them. Gray walked out of the cave, radiating a different type of pressure. This was pure gravitational force. He was subconsciously radiating it. He learned something new as well. How am I not surprised? Void shook his head. He was already used to Gray's freakishness, so he didn't find it surprising that Gray acquired a new ability this time around. It was something he usually did from time to time. As long as they didn't think about it too much, it wouldn't really be a concern or anything. Others wouldn't be this calm about it, however, since Gray was already too powerful to begin with. If he added new powers to it, then he would be a force to be reckoned with. You finally learned it. Void commented. Oh, this. It's just the beginning. Gray stretched his body and Void could hear his bones and muscles roaring, as if wanting to come to life. The dragon blood essence? He was a little confused. Yap. It triggered when my physical strength improved. I still don't know why, but I can tell that I'm stronger than before. Gray nodded while moving his fingers. Lucky. Void clicked his tongue. This was all he could say about this. Gray was extremely lucky for him to be able to actually get the dragon blood in his body to resonate with him. This would be beneficial to him in the long run. If they were lucky, they might even get to acquire more dragon blood essence, and this would help further increase Gray's strength. This will be a problem. Gray muttered when he sensed his body. He had finally left the 7th stage of the Overlord plane, entering the 8th stage. But he noticed since he got to the late stages of the Overlord plane that advancing seemed to become harder. The essence required was too large. Even with his multiple elements, which had increased his cultivation speed, this was about to become a hindrance to him. At this rate, he would grow even slower when compared to before. If his friends heard this, they would gang up on him and beat him up. Gray had always been advancing faster than the others. Klaus was the only one who had been able to move at a faster pace, and it was all thanks to his freakish luck of acquiring good things. If Gray felt he was advancing at a snail's speed, then the others aren't even moving in the first place. Chapter 798. The biggest improvement Gray made wasn't comprehending gravity, rather, it was the huge boost in his Earth elemental grade and his physical strength. PDNVE, his physical strength went from around the 5th stage of the Overlord plane to the 8th stage. It was currently tied with his cultivation stage. Then for his Earth elemental grade, it shot past the violet grade and settled at the red grade. Of all his elements, the Earth element currently had the 2nd highest grade, from being among the lowest to becoming the 2nd highest. Gray felt a tinge of satisfaction from his upgrade. This would help in his advancement here. What now? Void asked. Gray's strength has gone up, which meant that he had achieved his purpose of coming here. There is a chance to improve further, but it will take too long. Gray wanted to join a faction, so he didn't have all the time in the world. Let's check out the capital once again. Maybe those guys aren't done with their mission yet. Gray speculated. The group told him they wanted to raid the capital. He knew they couldn't rush in carelessly since the danger would be high. If they wanted to do anything, it would take some time and careful planning. All right, let's go then. Void nodded. Gray and Void left the cave he was cultivating in and headed for the capital. It took them a little over 2 days to get to their destination. They stayed in their usual spot, with Void sneaking in to see if he could find any juicy news. Gray thought of bringing out the brothers, but when he thought about it, he left them alone. He didn't know if there was a way they could call others. Void came back 2 hours later to inform him there had been no unusual activities in the capital of late. Could they have given up on the idea of their raid? Gray fell into thoughts. He didn't really know much about the group, and since he wasn't all that interested in the raid from the start, he didn't bother to find out why they weren't there. The journey here had given him a lot of improvement, so he was satisfied. He had never been the greedy type. Let's get going. He turned around decisively. There were multiple opportunities for him here, but he didn't want to rely on Trevor's for his upgrading. This was enough for him for now. Maybe after consolidating his cultivation when he broke through to the Sage Plane he would attempt using a treasure once again. As things stand, even if he shared that treasure with Void, he wouldn't try to use it to improve his cultivation. Instead, he would focus it on his elemental grade. Gray brought out his tracking device, and after getting the direction of the one he hid after entering this place, he headed in that direction. Void didn't have any problems with them leaving this place now since there was nothing of interest to him here. He hadn't sensed anything that he liked, and the few times he entered the capital, he took some souvenirs. 2 days later, Gray and Void got to where the portal they used in coming in was, and they couldn't help but watch from afar. He could see multiple horned men standing there, and all of them were at the peak of the Overlord plane. Their auras were different from that of the horned youths he fought against the last time. They were far more powerful than those youths. Crap, they managed to locate it. He couldn't help but complain. This was his only way of leaving this place freely. The idea of using the fusion state came to his mind, and just as he was about to use it, he saw a scene that made his heart sink. The group of horned men created a formation that made the portal shake vigorously. Damn it! They're destroying it. Gray gritted his teeth angrily. If this portal was closed, then he had no way of leaving. However, he couldn't rush into it now even with the fusion state since the space was unstable. Rushing in would mean he had to risk being trapped in space, or even worse, the spatial tunnel back to the Aurora continent breaks apart and he enters the turbulent space. Why do these things always happen to me? He felt a tinge of frustration. He could only watch as the portal back to the Aurora continent was destroyed. What now? Void asked. Even he had no way of going back to the Aurora continent. His control over space wasn't at that level yet. Besides, he didn't even know how far they were from the Aurora continent. The main reason that Expert was able to create this portal was that he already had a link, which was the portal the Horned race used in entering the Aurora continent. What else can we do? We will have to use the portal they are using. Gray sighed in exhaustion. Just the thought of how they were going to pass through a large number of Horned men to reach the portal annoyed him. We should wait a little longer, maybe 20 can work something out. Void suggested. Is there a way you can connect this portal to the one in the Aurora continent? Gray asked, a little pessimistic. I could try. But they would have to leave after destroying the portal. And if the time is too long, it would be difficult. Void explained. Gray nodded and sat down. Since they wouldn't be leaving now, there was no use to worry. 10 minutes later, the portal Gray used in coming here was destroyed by the Horned men. When they destroyed it, they stood in the same position for some time, waiting to see if the person on the other side would open another portal. After almost 1 hour, they decided it was time to leave since the person on the other side didn't open another portal. For all they knew, the person or people on the other side could have even opened another portal somewhere they aren't aware of. Chapter 799. The group of Horned men left after 30 more minutes. Gray and Void had to wait an extra 30 minutes just to be sure they were gone. Luckily, they decided to wait. The Horned men came back 15 minutes after they left to check out the place once again. We'll have to be quick, Gray suggested. Void nodded and vanished from where they were. Gray didn't come out since it would be better if Void was alone. He was prepared in case Void is able to open the portal so he could move at a moment's notice. When Void appeared at the spot where the portal was previously located, he unleashed his domain so he could get the best control over the space in that area. He tried to sense the link that was created there when the previous portal was created. After over 2 minutes, he couldn't help but open his eyes, a little disappointed. The time they took before coming was too much. Had he been able to come here around 30 minutes or even 1 hour after the portal was destroyed, he would have been able to sense it easily. But now, the link was shattered. Unless he was in the Sage Plane, or above, he wouldn't be able to connect it again. We can't use this place any longer, Void reported after going back. Okay. I guess it's time to interrogate the brothers, Gray said with a cold smile. Void quickly brought out his mace with an excited expression. We're interrogating them, we have no plans of killing them. Gray couldn't help but remind Void when he saw his expression. Void nodded vigorously as he waited for Gray to take out the brothers. Gray first brought out the Horned man he had in his possession before entering this realm. My brothers have finally. The Horned man paused and looked around a little confused that he couldn't find anyone. He thought after giving his brothers a hint of where Gray was going, the next time he would be taken out would be after Gray was defeated by them. Oh, they're here too. You can talk as much as you want later in the future. Gray brought out the duo who were still unconscious. The eyes of the Horned man nearly bulged out of his head. He never expected his brothers would also be defeated by Gray. This was a shocking discovery. Gray smiled when he saw this and didn't try to wake the other 2 Horned men, rather, he waited for the Horned man to sink this in. What do you want? The Horned man asked. Where is the portal you used in entering my world? Gray asked. I don't. A small ice needle appeared in the air and started to pierce into the body of the Black Horned man. The Horned man who was conscious felt a pain in his chest as he saw what Gray was doing to his brother and paused. Why are you so evil? He couldn't help but ask. Are you going to answer my question, or do you want him to lose an arm? Gray created a fire blade that hung above the right arm of the Black Horned man. The Horned man looked at his brother and could only shake his head with a sigh. What was the use of even going against Gray in the first place? He told Gray what he knew, and before he could follow up with any request, Void appeared behind him and hit him with the mace. This was the part he hated the most about being captured by Gray. Void's brutality knows no bounds. "Should we confirm from the other one?" Gray asked Void. "There's no harm in trying." Void raised his shoulder to indicate it wasn't a bad idea. Gray woke up the blue-horned man and questioned him as well. Just like the first horned man, he refused to speak, but after Gray threatened to cut off the head of the black-horned man, he told them what they needed to hear. His words were almost identical to that of his brother Gray questioned first, but a few details were missing from his words, and also some that the first horned man didn't add. Gray compared both words and mainly picked out the words that were identical, which was the security there was very tight. The horned race protected the portal since it was very important to them. They didn't have the thought of destroying it because it gave them hope of being able to break the shackles of their realm. The place the portal was located is a few thousand kilometers away from the capital. Most of the experts in the horned race stayed around the place where they felt was the center between the capital and where the portal was located, so they would be able to rush to either place in case of any issues. Gray and Void could only head back to the capital. They guessed that maybe the group was quickly found and they had to rush out of the place, or if there was a chance that they were still there since they still haven't carried out the raid they said they wanted to do. When they got back to the capital, Gray sent Void out once again for any information while also moving around the outskirts of the capital. He saw a familiar figure after walking for almost 30 minutes. It was from the group of geniuses he met in the town he first noticed the activities of the horned race. Without delay, he followed the person and was stunned when he found the group staying at a hidden cave just outside the capital. He finally went inside the cave after confirming that it was safe and that it was not a trap set by the horned race. "How did you find this place?" A young man questioned Gray the moment he entered the place. Looking around, there were over 20 people present, all in the Overlord plane, and young as well. Chapter 800. Gray was about to speak when he heard a familiar voice from inside. "Let him in, he's a friend." Gray took a peek at the person who spoke, and it was the young man who was the leader of the group he met at the gorge. "I thought you wanted to leave?" the young man asked. "I never said that, I only said I don't trust you people. And yes, I did want to leave," Gray replied as he looked around. He was a little familiar with a few faces, while most of them were faces he wasn't sure he had seen before. Even if he had, he must have forgotten their faces. "Then why are you here?" one of the young men from the side asked coldly. Gray threw a glance at the young man but didn't give a reply to his question. The young man glanced at the person who spoke before moving his gaze back to Gray. Then, "What made you change your mind?" "I couldn't leave." Gray's reply surprised the others, especially those who fought with him when they were fighting against the geniuses of the horned race. They knew from then that he wasn't someone who placed humanity on a high pedestal, so they never for once thought he would be unable to leave after seeing what humans were going through in this realm. "Looks like you changed after seeing some things," one of the young ladies said. It was the young lady he met in the first town. "No, I literally couldn't leave." They managed to find the location where the portal was located. "When I got there, they were already trying to destroy it," Gray answered. The others exchanged glances and couldn't help but look at a particular figure. It was a young man among them. "You're the cause of this," Gil said coldly. Wove.co. "I only told them to leave. How is it my fault that they would give away the location of the portal?" the young man asked with a grunt. HMPH. "I'll deal with you later. The problem now is how do we leave this place?" the leader of the group snorted. "The only way we can. There's another portal, the one they use in entering our world," Gray stated. "It would be protected, and we don't even know the location," the leader of the group replied. "Don't worry, I've helped out with the location of the portal. All I need is support when heading there. Gray answered. So, in short, you want to use us? A young lady asked. Not entirely, it's more of a mutual benefit. I show you the way to leave, and you help me deal with some problems. You can say we're using each other. Gray's reply was straightforward, and it made a few of the youths have a change in expressions. They looked at Gray with an annoyed expression. Even if you want to use us, do you have to be so plain about it? This was the question in the heads of the youths. Even the leader of the group was a little taken aback. Gil was the only one with a smile. He was even laughing softly. I like straightforward people. Gil laughed. We still haven't raided the capital yet. If you agree to render your help for this mission, we'll naturally assist you in this. The leader of the group didn't feel annoyed with Gray's words. It was the truth to begin with. It was just like the time they asked Gray to join them in the raid. They only asked him because they knew he was powerful. If he wasn't, they wouldn't be bothered with him. Gray stayed quiet for some time, looking around. He contemplated the matter for some time before nodding. Although he could leave on his own, it would be difficult for him, especially since his opponents would be too many. He has no problem when fighting against a crowd, but not a crowd of people whose strength was almost on his level when he goes all out. Great, we'll be heading out in 3 days' time. We are on the final stage of our plans. The leader nodded before walking deeper into the cave. Gray didn't say anything else and went to sit down at a secluded corner, away from the people. Void was still in the capital, trying to snoop for any information. He didn't forget to tell Void about seeing this group, since this was one of the reasons he told Void to sneak into the city. Gray had his eyes closed, speaking with Void when a figure walked up to him. It was the young lady from the faction he encountered in the town. You came. The young lady said, a happy smile on her face. I had no choice. Gray replied. The young lady heard Gray's explanation the first time, so she didn't bother to ask any further. She sat close to him and started to engage him in small talk. Gray decided to entertain. He listened to her words, while occasionally saying some things. He found out from the young lady that her name was Margaret, and she was from a faction that can't really be called a top faction in the region like the ones Klaus and the others joined, but it wasn't a small one as well. It was a wind-based faction. She and her companions were captured when they saw the Horned race. They blindly charged into the formation the Horned men did, and their strength was reduced by a lot. Before they could think of how to break free, they were quickly taken down by the group of Horned men. Gray shook his head before asking how their experience here was. Margaret told him they were being transferred to a place called the White Desert when the group of 5 intervened. Guess the top-level geniuses are sent to the White Desert for proper extraction and refining. Gray thought to himself. Time slowly went by, and other than Margaret, he spoke with a few more people. The day they planned to raid the capital finally arrived. This is the end of this video. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed and wish you wonderful rest of the day. The Silent Raptor's out.